Live stream is started. Sergeants, can you start your recordings? Computer recording started. You were muted there, Sergeant Play.
Recording to the cloud, all set.
And you can start your opening. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to the remote hearing on civil service and labor. Will council members and staff please turn on their video at this time? Thank you. To minimize disruptions, please place all cell phones and electronics to vibrate. To send your testimony, please send it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Good afternoon. I am Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa, Chair of the New York City Council's Committee on Civil Service and Labor. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we will be joined by Councilmember Marjorie Velasquez, the Chair of the New York City Council's Committee on Consumer Affairs, and I would also like to acknowledge my other colleagues who have joined us, Councilmember Menon and Councilmember Bottcher. So thanks again for joining us today. I want to welcome everyone to the committee's first oversight hearing of the new legislative session. Today's hearing will focus on strengthening workers' rights across the city's workforce. Despite widespread public support for policies that promote good jobs, the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored how just and safe working conditions, strong benefits, and living wages are far from guaranteed, even for those members deemed essentials to their communities and the city's economy. Many New York City workers provide necessary services in face-to-face industries and have been working without access to personal protective equipment or have been denied paid safe and sick leave. For those workers who do raise concerns to their employers about health and workplace safety, they risk termination for speaking out. The COVID-19 pandemic has only served to deepen the existing racial and economic inequalities in New York City. For example, Black and Latino New Yorkers have suffered food hardships, housing insecurity, unemployment at far higher rates than white New Yorkers since the start of the pandemic. Confronting these challenges to build a good jobs economy will require transformative solutions. The city must also build up worker power by supporting local unionization efforts, leveraging the city's employment and contracting power, increasing enforcement efforts to penalize exploitative employers. New York City has some of the strongest worker protections in the country. Unfortunately, too many exploitative employers break these laws and take advantage of our city's most marginalized workers. According to the Economic Policy Institute, exploitative employers held nearly $1 billion from New York workers in 2017 by failing to pay the minimum wage. When workers in low-income households are illegally underpaid, not only do they harm those workers and their families, but the public is harmed as well. The government collects less tax revenue and taxpayers must provide additional funding for social welfare programs to fill the gaps. We need strong outreach efforts to educate employers and workers about worker protection laws, as well as consequential enforcement. New York City also has significant impact on workforce standards in its capacity as an employer and through its own contracting authority. In our own employment, we should lead by example by adopting model practices and fair pay and benefits. We should also leverage our footprint to create prevailing wage jobs and discourage agencies from contracting with exploitative employers. As we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, it is critical that we take steps to recognize the important roles that all workers play in making our city's economy function. Whether their workplace is a fast food restaurant, paid care facility, or a warehouse. I look forward to working closely with the Department of Consumer Affairs and Worker Protection to ensure all workers are educated about their rights and are afforded the dignity they deserve. I would also like to take the time to thank the committee staff for all their hard work in putting today's hearing together. Committee Counsel Bianca Vitali and Policy Analyst Elizabeth Arts. I would also like to thank my own staff, Chief of Staff James Burke, Deputy Chief of Staff Kiana Diaz, and my Communications Director, Amelia Eberling. I also want to take this moment to recognize and pause for a moment of silence for the loss of two great labor leaders these past 2 weeks. This week, we lost Eddie Kay, and the week before, we lost Radames Rivera. May they work in peace, may they rest in peace, and may the solidarity forever live forward. Thank you.
Chair, would you like to turn it over to CM Velasquez to give some remarks before
Yes.
we go into procedural matters?
Yes,
Awesome.
if she's here, I'll now turn it over to Chair Velasquez for her remarks.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good morning. Actually, good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Marjorie Velasquez, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Councilmember Carmen de la Rosa, who's the chair of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, for convening this hearing today. Our oversight hearing today will focus on strengthening workers' rights across the city's workforce and how the council, the administration, can work collaboratively to ensure New York City is the most labor-friendly city in the country. New York City has a rich history and tradition of labor organizing, and this activism has led to workplace protections for the diverse workers of the city. Due in part to corporate lobbying and actions of federal lawmakers, however, union memberships have suffered in recent years. In 2019, 10.5% of wage workers were unionized, half the rate of union membership for the wage workers in 1983. I believe we are starting to witness a reemergence in unionization efforts as the residents of this city recognize the fact that when workers are able to come together and form a union, they can collectively bargain and improve their wages, benefits, and working conditions. As the workers of the city take action to ensure that they are fairly paid a living wage, their government partners must also be taking action to ensure our laws are pro-worker. Last session, the committee I now chair expanded pay, safe, and sick leave for the private sector and nonprofit employees. The law expanded paid leave for businesses with over 100 employees and established paid leave for smaller businesses as well. I look forward to receiving an update from DCWP today on their enforcement of the paid, safe, and sick leave law and any impacts the pandemic has had on their implementation and employers' treatment of workers. Last session, the committee also helped enhance workplace protections for non-union workers. The committee passed a package of legislation to improve working conditions for delivery workers and also licensed construction industry middlemen known as labor brokers to uncover exploitation in the industry. As chair of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection this session, I look forward to working with Chair De La Rosa to ensure the council is acting pro-labor legislation to help the workers of the city. The pandemic has exacerbated already existing problems in the workplace for many city residents. And as the city seeks to recover from the pandemic, the welfare of workers must be a priority. I look forward to engaging with DCWP, unions, and other stakeholders today on how we can enhance workers' rights. I'd like to take the moment to thank my central staff team, Senior Counsel Stephanie Jones, Senior Policy Analysts Noah and Leah, and my Chief of Staff Nick Rollison and Deputy Chief Alex Anderson for their hard work. And now I'd like to turn it back to mi hermana, Chair De La Rosa.
Thank you, Chair Velasquez. Before we go on, I also want to recognize that we've been joined by Councilmember Nurse, Councilmember Hanks, and Councilmember Joseph. I will now turn it over to our committee counsel, Bianca Vitali, to go over some procedural items.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Bianca Vitali, and I am counsel to the Committee on Civil Service and Labor. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, when you will be unmuted by the host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called. I will be periodically announcing who the next panelist will be. For everyone testifying today, please note that there may be a few seconds of delay before you are unmuted, and we thank you in advance for your patience. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. At today's hearing, the first panelist to give testimony will be representatives from the administration, followed by council member questions, and then members of the public will be called on to testify. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. I will now call on members of the administration to testify. Testimony will be provided by Deputy Commissioner of Labor Policy and Standards, Benjamin Holt, and Steve Antonani, Executive Director of External Affairs, will be available for questions. Before we begin, I will administer the oath. I will call on each of you individually for a response. Please raise your right hand. Deputy Commissioner Holt, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Executive Director Antoni?
I do.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner Holt, you may begin when ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair De La Rosa and members of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor. My name is Benjamin Holt. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection for the Office of Labor Policy and Standards. I'm joined today by my colleague, Stephen Etanani, who is our agency's Executive Director for External Affairs. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss DCWP's protections for private sector workers. DCWP conducts outreach and education, research and advocacy, and enforcement of city workplace laws. New York City's workplace laws include, among others, the Paid Safe and Sick Leave Law, the Fair Workweek Law for fast food and retail workers, the Freelancers and Free Act for independent contractors, and legislation passed last year to stand up groundbreaking protections for third-party food delivery workers. These laws strive to promote greater economic and job stability for workers, whether that's the ability to stay home and take care of oneself or a loved one who is sick with COVID-19, to know when you are working so you can plan your childcare or a second job, to know you will be paid for your hard work, or to have greater control over your delivery routes. Our agency administers these laws on behalf of workers, recovering restitution for violations and promoting compliance going forward. In doing so, we place great emphasis on the following: creating plain language materials for both workers and employers, prioritizing retaliation protections, which are essential to making rights real by fast-tracking complaints about retaliatory firings and other adverse actions, emphasizing that immigration status is irrelevant to coverage and that all workers can contact us confidentially and in confidence. And finally, looking beyond individual complaints to ensure that workplace-wide compliance with the law is at the center of our work. During the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted how vital worker protections are and always will be for New Yorkers. The pandemic continues to bring unprecedented economic hardships for New York City's working families. Not only the fear and uncertainty that enveloped our city since the early days of the emergency, but the real and abrupt disruptions to hundreds of thousands of workers with respect to their incomes, their schedules, and their jobs. And we must particularly recognize the sacrifices made day in and day out by essential workers to keep our city running during some of these most difficult moments and still today. New York City's workplace laws, alongside protections at the federal and state levels, have been a critical resource for workers navigating COVID-19. During the pandemic, we've continued to enforce the city's workplace laws, done robust outreach and education, developed new materials tailored to the realities of this crisis, and have worked collaboratively with council on new protections, both for this specific moment and beyond. From the onset, we understood how vital it was to ensure workers knew about their rights within the context of COVID-19. Since March 2020, we have held more than 440 events dedicated to worker issues. We collaborated with our city and community-based partners to develop interagency materials and resources for workers to promote critical workplace protections. For example, this past summer, DCWP partnered with Test and Trace, the New York City Department of Health, and others to distribute paid safe and sick leave law materials at COVID-19 testing locations and vaccine sites citywide. Our ongoing educational efforts provide, in at least 14 languages, essential guidance on all types of protections, city, state, and federal, available to workers, as well as safe practices for businesses operating under the reality of COVID-19. We also adapted our process to the new reality faced by workers in New York City to make sure we were focusing our resources on the most pressing issues workers were facing. First, we adjusted our intake process to be able to respond to a far higher volume of non-city issues most critical to workers because of COVID-19, such as workplace health and safety, unemployment insurance, and wage and hour issues. Since March 2020, we've received close to 21,700 inquiries and complaints regarding worker protections, the majority for non-city issues, which we're able to refer to appropriate agencies and other resources. Second, when business reopening commenced in June of 2020, we stood up a new hotline for workers to reach us with questions or complaints about safe reopening practices. Furthermore, city enforcement agencies, including DCWP, coordinated with one another to conduct more than 315,000 health and safety inspections of businesses across the city. In 2021, city agencies again collaborated on close to 100,000 health and safety inspections during the Key to NYC initiative. This work has helped ensure that our businesses were operating safely for the benefit of consumers, workers, employers, and a sustainable recovery for our city. And third, to achieve quicker results for workers impacted by COVID-19, we've adjusted our enforcement process to give priority to COVID-19 related complaints, to streamline the fact gathering and negotiation phases, to, for example, be able to more swiftly secure compensation for workers who took leave due to COVID-19, or affirm a worker's right to take care of a child whose school was closed. Overall, since the start of the pandemic, we've secured nearly $5.5 million in restitution on behalf of nearly 9,500 workers. Making sure workers had access to their rights during the pandemic meant that we were not just protecting them, but also their families, their coworkers, their employers, and the public at large. We have also worked collaboratively with Council to expand New York City protections for workers, such as our paid safe and sick leave law, which provides, which provides leave to more than 3.6 million workers in New York City. Local Law 97 of the year 2020 expanded paid safe and sick leave to 56 hours for more than 1.8 million workers, provided greater coverage for approximately 18,000 domestic workers, and made it easier for all eligible workers to use accrued leave to take care of themselves or their loved ones. Late last year, we again worked with Council to pass Local Law 172, which provided workers with an additional 4 hours of leave time per injection to take a child to get vaccinated or to care for a child experiencing side effects from vaccination. Furthermore, in partnership with Council, we enacted unprecedented protections to support hundreds of thousands of essential workers in the fast food, hotel, and food delivery industries. As a result of new just cause protections, fast food workers can no longer be arbitrarily fired from their jobs and have a right to reclaim their former jobs if they are laid off or fired illegally. Longtime workers at hotels are entitled to up to 30 weeks of severance pay if they were laid off during the pandemic. And hotel workers also have a right to be retained at their place of employment for 90 days if a hotel is transferred or sold. And finally, third-party food delivery workers will have new key rights to, among other things, better control their delivery routes, receive timely payment for their work, and have minimum pay rates to be set by DCWP later this year. As Mayor Adams has said, the priority of this administration is to serve working New Yorkers throughout the 5 boroughs, which means ensuring that they have dignity and economic justice in the workplace. Our recovery presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make a real change for New Yorkers, and the administration believes strongly in supporting New York City's workers and bringing meaningful change to their lives. The City Council has always been a close partner in supporting private sector workers and developing the next generation of workplace laws. In this new term, we look forward to our continued collaboration during this unique moment and opportunity to realize workplace justice for New Yorkers. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Hall. I will now turn it over to questions from Chair De La Rosa, followed by council member questions. Panelists, please stay unmuted if possible during this question and answer period. Thank you again. Chair De La Rosa, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Halt. I also want to recognize that we've been joined by our colleagues, Councilmember Moya, Councilmember Feliz, and Councilmember Brewer. Thank you for joining us. So, Deputy Commissioner, I want to have a sense for what the intake process looks like for DCWP. So, when you all get a complaint that has to do with safe or sick leave laws being not being followed, or fair work week laws, or protections for fast food workers. Can you walk us through the complaint process and the intake process, as well as the investigation and resolution of those complaints?
Sure, and thank you for the question. So we have dedicated intake staff in our office who are our first line for talking to members of the public. Workers in New York City can contact us through a variety of ways. We have a direct number that workers can call to reach our intake staff. Workers can also use the 311 system by saying something like worker to be transferred to us. We also have a dedicated email address that workers can use, which is olps@dcwp.nyc.gov. We also, obviously, previously were doing a higher volume of walk-in appointments and intakes. That has not been prominent recently for obvious reasons, though we are still able to meet with workers in person if that is their preferred method of coming in. So once a complaint or a question comes into our intake staff, it goes through an initial vetting process to determine first, is this raising an issue under one of the laws that our agency enforces, or is this raising an issue under another law where we need to identify the appropriate referral resources for the workers. We have templates containing referral information that we use to provide to workers on any number of issues, wage hour questions or complaints, issues relating to unemployment insurance, or workers' compensation, a host of issues that may be enforced by either another agency at the city level or at the state or federal levels. So the first kind of level of vetting is to identify what is something that we can enforce versus something where we need to connect a worker to another set of resources. Once we have done that, the intakes that do raise issues under the laws we enforce go through an initial vetting process by one of our supervising investigators to do essentially what I would call a quick jurisdictional check to make sure that it states a valid complaint that we are able to enforce. That might involve making sure that it's timely, or that the work took place in New York City, or some other relatively simple threshold issue to ensure that we do have jurisdiction. Once we've done that, the supervising investigator will assign it to an investigator who then takes ownership of the case. And that's when the real investigative process starts. That involves a more detailed follow-up and interview with the worker to fully understand their situation, the complaints they're making and what violations there may be. Also understanding, for example, the breadth of the problem in the workplace, whether or not this is something that applies to this individual worker who has contacted us, or possibly is a broader problem, or we need to take a broader look at what's happening at this workplace. It also is a moment at which we may identify other sources of information that we should be looking at, whether that's talking to witnesses, such as other coworkers, or other people who may have witnessed a particular incident that the worker is raising with us. It is also a time to assemble documents, other kinds of information that the worker may have to support the claim that they're bringing to us. Once we have made a preliminary finding based on the information from the worker and what they've been able to assemble for us, we will typically contact the employer to notify them that they are now under investigation, and to begin the process of requesting information from them to substantiate the claim and or verify that they are complying with the law. That process generally looks a little bit like what you would see in discovery in litigation, an information exchange where we're effectively requesting documents and information from them. Once we have done that, we are able to develop a preliminary finding, which we present to the employer. And at that point, the employer has the opportunity to provide any countervailing evidence or rebutting information that they may have that wasn't previously provided to us. And we try to resolve the case. Obviously, our goal is to try and use our resources as efficiently as possible. The best outcome for us is to reach quick resolutions. So we try to reach resolutions that will make workers whole, and also give us confidence that the employer is going to comply going forward. If we are not able to reach an agreement at that point, we will typically assign an attorney to start preparing the case for litigation at the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. An attorney will then, in collaboration with the investigator on the case, take ownership and prepare the case to move forward at oath. Now, the way the oath process works, it looks very similar to what you see in other types of litigation. There are many opportunities to settle during that process. In fact, the oath process typically begins with a settlement conference where oath will try to bring the parties together to resolve the issue. If that is unsuccessful, we will typically then proceed with discovery through the oath process to get any additional information we may need and or obtain information we were not able to through our regular investigative process, all with an eye towards getting ready for a trial at oath. Now, again, the process at oath can because of the back and forth around information sharing and the preparation necessary to conduct a full trial, we're talking about a process that's going to take at least several months and typically can take longer than that. There are many opportunities along the way to settle, and I would say most cases do settle. The vast majority of cases filed at oath will settle before we reach a full administrative trial. But that would be the next significant step in the case, is a trial at oath, after which oath will issue a recommended decision that comes back to our agency for a final decision on the case. For purposes of completion, at that point, an employer would then have an opportunity to challenge the final agency decision via an Article 78 proceeding. But that is kind of in a nutshell what the process looks like from beginning to end. And please, any parts of that where you'd like more information or I can provide something further, please let me know.
Great, thank you. One follow-up question is the actual investigating portion of it. How long does that usually take? And then does the department track substantiated complaints?
Yes. So we do track substantiated complaints, and we report those annually via our State of Workers' Rights Report, which is our division's. Essentially, it's our annual report reporting on the activities of our worker protection division. And substantiated complaints is one of the items that we track there. In terms of how long the investigative process takes, there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer for that. The cases that we handle come in many different sizes and shapes. And part of that relates to the tools that we are trying to use to make sure that we are creating strong incentives for compliance. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a couple moments. But we have cases that will range anywhere from an individual worker with a very discrete one-time issue where, let's say, they were not paid for using sick leave. If we are handling a case exclusively focused on that, the investigative phase can generally proceed quite quickly. However, we often get cases where we have multiple complaints from more than one worker. Oftentimes, they are also not just raising one type of violation, but rather a series of ways in which their employer is not complying with the law. Additionally, we use our discretion to expand complaint-initiated cases at times. And what I mean by that is we may get a complaint from a worker who initially is bringing us a single issue. However, in the course of speaking with that worker, we may come to understand that actually this is a pervasive issue in the workplace, and this is not just a matter of that worker's rights being violated, but really all of their coworkers are in a similar situation. And we do have authority, and we regularly exercise this authority to then expand that to a workplace-wide investigation. So at that point, we may be talking about going from 2 or 3 complaints that we received to a much larger volume of workers, anywhere from tens to hundreds to even thousands of workers, where we are doing a comprehensive workplace-wide look. So that is to kind of just give you a sense of like the range of types of investigations. And obviously the timelines for those are going to vary in terms of how long it takes. And the more complicated it is, the greater number of violations that are involved, the higher number of workers involved in a case. Those are all factors that can make it obviously take longer. Now, we have also, recognizing that part of our role and part of what we need to do is use our resources as efficiently as possible. We have spent a lot of time trying to build efficiencies into the process so that we can handle the larger cases relatively quickly. But there is a range. Now, I don't right now have a metric for you specifically on the investigation phase. But I can tell you that if you look across all of our laws for the calendar year 2021, I believe the average time to resolve a case from, now this is not just investigation, this is from initial intake through the endpoint of the case, which may be an investigation resolution, it might be a litigation decision, or it may resolve there. But looking at the full docket, I believe for calendar year 2021, our average time to resolve a case is around 365 days.
And do you keep a list? Does the department keep a list of employers who repeatedly violate the city worker protection laws? Is there some sort of tracking?
Well, what I will tell you is that we, as part of our case management process, we certainly keep track of all the employers that we are coming into contact with. That includes investigations that we're handling, cases where we find violations, but even for many intakes, those may be attached to a particular employer, even without a violation. All of that does get recorded in our case management process. So we do have information on prior violators who may have come on our radar before.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues for questions as well. But before we do, I wanted to ask about domestic workers specifically. In 2018, the department's paid care division conducted a study of domestic care workers in New York City to study the findings and policy recommendations. They were included in a report called Lifting Up Paid Care Workers. And there were some recommendations that came out of that report, including new tactics to address enforcement and ensure compliance in private households, removing barriers to worker-owned cooperatives, development of new measures to ensure workforce development programs, support fair labor practices. To your knowledge, what progress has the agency made on researching and implementing recommendations? And what has the department done to crack down on labor violations in paid home care field?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I appreciate that question about our paid care division, which obviously is a result of this council's work to ensure that there is a dedicated resource for paid care workers in New York City. The primary emphasis of our paid care division over the past several years has really been in 2 areas. The first is outreach and education. Part of what the paid care division does is coordinate a working group of stakeholders working in this space. So we are working very closely with groups like the National Domestic Workers Alliance, DRUM, Make the Road New York, Hand in Hand, an employer association, and other worker and employer side stakeholders in the paid care space. And a big part of our work together with those partners certainly is to discuss policy-related issues, but also to work together with them to try and reach as many domestic workers as we can, but also to reach as many employers of domestic workers as possible. So we've put significant resources into that type of outreach specifically for domestic workers. We have also had several cases, including a couple earlier last year, but also very recently, that we have resolved, including paid safe and sick leave violations for domestic workers who are employed by private households. We've done some press around those and certainly tried to use that as an opportunity to further amplify the message that domestic worker rights are essential and need to be respected in New York City. That enforcement, along with the enforcement we've done for other sectors of the paid care workforce, such as home health aides, has definitely been an area where we've invested on enforcement. With respect to the policy proposals that you listed from the 2018 paid care report, I'm not in a position to give you an update on those right now. That is certainly something I'm happy to report back to you on subsequent to the hearing. But I will tell you that the emphasis of the paid care division, and this is kind of taking into account the resources we have and making decisions about how we're going to use them, has really been focused more on outreach, education, and enforcement rather than additional research and advocacy in the meantime. That remains part of the mission of the paid care division and certainly something we are very interested in. But I need to report back to you with respect to those specific proposals.
I also want to note that in part, the reporting function of our Office of Labor Policy and Standards is also a primer to the City Council. I mean, you all have the legislative authority to act in many of these cases. I think we're open, as the Deputy Commissioner said, to kind of discussing in more detail some of these policies that were outlined in the report, but a lot of them do require, in some cases, legislative authority. It's not saying that DCWP on its own would be able to implement as a regulatory agency.
Great, that's what we love to hear. We have plenty of ideas for reporting. I want to pass it back to our committee counsel who call members for questions.
Awesome, thank you, Chair. I will now call on council members in the order they have raised their Zoom hand. If you would like to ask a question, council members, and you have not yet raised your hand in Zoom, please do so now. Council members, please keep your questions to 5 minutes. The Sergeant at Arms will keep a timer and will let you know when your time is up. You should begin once I have called on you and the Sergeant has announced that you may begin. First, we'll hear from Councilmember Bottcher and then Councilmember Nurse. And then after Councilmember Nurse, we have CM Menon. Councilmember Menon has also joined. So Councilmember Bottcher, you may begin.
Thank you very much. I'd like to get an update on the Chipotle lawsuit. In my council district, we have many Chipotle restaurants, and I've walked the picket line outside those restaurants with 32BJ and workers from those restaurants who have come forward alleging fair work week violations, changing employees' schedules without sufficient notice or pay, requiring employees to work consecutive shifts without sufficient time off or extra pay, failure to offer additional shifts to current employees before new employees are hired. And I understand that your agency filed a lawsuit against the Chipotle Corporation last year, I believe seeking hundreds of millions of dollars in payment to workers. I was hoping to get an update on where that stands.
Yeah, thank you for the question and obviously for your support in this area, Council Member. What I will say is obviously you can see reflected in the legal papers that we have filed and also in the past media work that we have done that this is a significant and a priority enforcement action for us. That being said, it is still an ongoing matter and I'm not able to comment on details of an active matter at this time.
Got it. And how does it work when a lawsuit is in progress and additional violations continue to come forward? Because I continue to hear from workers that Chipotle is continuing to violate the spirit and the letter of that law. How does that affect the ongoing lawsuit? Do you add to the dollar amount sought? How does that work?
So if it's okay, I'd like to answer that like a little more generally, and say that yes, in the course of enforcement generally, we certainly look at new developing information around ongoing violations. We have, I would say, two core priorities when we are doing our enforcement work. First is to make workers whole for violations. Workers are entitled to money when their rights are violated, and it is one of our priorities to get money back for workers when their rights have been violated. The second core priority is to promote compliance going forward. And obviously, if we are in the middle of an enforcement action and we are hearing about ongoing and new violations, that is going to cause us serious concerns about that employer's good faith or willingness to actually come into compliance. But that is something that we always incorporate into our consent orders when we do resolve cases. We don't settle just for money. We resolve cases to get money for workers, but also to try and put in place assurances that compliance is going to happen going forward. I think if you are hearing about ongoing violations with respect to any of our cases that you're aware of, I would encourage you to ask those workers to contact us. We are always ready and prepared to talk to workers about what is happening. And particularly with respect to real-time conditions, what's happening now, that is incredibly helpful to us. I think my advice would be to connect workers to us if you are hearing about violations in the course of an ongoing enforcement action.
Thank you very much.
CM Boucher, do you have any other questions for the administration?
No, please go ahead.
Okay,
No, thank you.
awesome. So I'm now going to turn to Councilmember Nurse. You may begin.
Time will begin.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. I just have just a general question for now, maybe two general questions, and then we'll maybe I'll come back for the second round. But I'm just curious how the budget cuts or any budget cuts might affect staffing and enforcement for you all this upcoming year. We'll start with that one, I guess.
So, with respect to resources and budget cuts, what I can tell you is that we have been able to work productively with our partners in city government, particularly with the Office of Management and Budget, to ensure that we have the resources we need to carry out our mandates. We really prioritize and do our best to be as efficient as possible. It is a real credit to my staff that we have been able to do what we have with the resources we have. And I think we have achieved great things for New York City workers over the past several years. And where we stand today, do we have what we need to do our work? I think we do. I would also point to a recent increase in resources that we have received for worker protection with respect to the delivery worker laws that were passed late last year. We have received additional funding, both in the form of money that we can use on contracting, advertising, and other types of external services, but also additional staff lines to ensure that we're going to have enough and the right types of people in-house to be able to enforce those laws. So I think, yes, we are adequately resourced. We are also, I think, very effective given what we have. Yeah.
Okay. And just my last question is more about the language accessibility part, especially as it relates to the delivery workers and other industries. Do you have any idea off the top of your head how many of your enforcement staff or field staff speak South Asian languages?
Off the top of my head, I would say 2 or more, but possibly it's 2. Obviously, language access is incredibly important. You know, I spoke earlier during my testimony about the importance of ensuring that our processes are accessible to immigrant workers. You know, obviously there is a host of different reasons why that is important. One of them is certainly language access where applicable. So we have, I would say, 2 staff members, possibly more, who speak South Asian languages, several staff members who speak Spanish. We also have representation for Chinese and Korean. Now that is specifically within our worker protection division. So in the Office of Labor Policy and Standards, there is also additional language capacity in our External Affairs division, which is where the agency outreach team resides. So many of the people who are going out into the field and like directly interacting with workers. And then we have access to other types of resources, such as Language Line, contracted interpreters, and then when we do create materials, that is obviously a huge priority to get them translated as quickly as possible. And typically we translate into a larger number of languages than the required, than what is required under city standards. But that certainly includes South Asian languages, and obviously for delivery workers, that is one of the major demographics. So we recently created a palm card for workers about these new laws that were going into effect, especially, you know, given how complicated it is in terms of there being different stages that it's happening throughout the course of the year. But one of the main priorities in creating that document was also to get the priority languages as quickly as possible, which did include Bengali among several others.
I do want to note that our Director of Community Affairs at DCWP is fluent in Bangla, and our External Affairs team has in-house language capacity ranging from Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, and as the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, that's just within our External Affairs division. We utilize Language Line and of course, have contracting services to procure simultaneous interpretation, as well as, you know, leaning on our stakeholder partners to bridge any language gaps that may exist.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll be turning it over to Council Member Menon. You may begin.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, Chair De La Rosa, for holding this hearing. I have to say I've got a particular interest in the subject matter. I served as a commissioner of this agency until 2016 and set up the paid sick leave division. So it's great to hear about the work that the agency is doing. I've got a couple specific questions on paid sick leave in particular. So in looking at the data, the agency closed 60 paid sick leave investigations during the first 4 months of fiscal year 2021, assessing approximately $186,000 in restitution for 582 employees. So that's about $320 per employee. As you testified, it took over 300 days to close out those cases on average. So my question is, has the time it takes this office to close out complaints improved?
I think, you know, there's a complicated answer to that. Yes, but I will add, you know, we started out, as you pointed out, as the paid sick leave division before we became the Office of Labor Policy and Standards. So we started out with a much more narrow mandate in terms of the work we were doing. We were focused on standing up and enforcing a particular law. Since that time, you know, our portfolio of work has expanded dramatically. We have added the Fair Work Week law for fast food and retail workers, the Freelancers and Free Act for independent contractors. We've added just cause protections for fast food workers. And obviously now we're in the midst of working on implementation for delivery workers. So over time, I think our efficiency and ability to process cases has definitely improved. We are also handling a lot more work, which impacts timelines as well. The way our office is structured, we have an investigations team. And our investigators, for the most part, are generalists, meaning that they will handle cases among all our different laws. They may have a docket that includes several paid sick leave cases, several fair work week cases. So I think I would say yes, that we have improved in terms of how we handle cases. Whether or not you see that reflected in the average timelines, I think depends on other factors, such as, our growing portfolio, which I've talked about. Also, most of what we're reporting comes in the form of averages. So, there may be cases that have been around for a long time that have been very contentious, which go all the way through the litigation process, which can affect the numbers. So that happens as well. But I'm proud of our team and the work we've done to really operationalize these programs. And I think whether or not it's reflected in the case closure timelines, if you step back and look at the range of work we're doing, I think there's clear improvement in how we're handling these.
I guess my concern would be that the agency appears to be stretched very thin. You mentioned the Freelance Isn't Free Act, you've got obviously paid sick leave, you have commuter benefits. In the expansion to take on labor protections, my concern would be that the agency has enough staff to actually do the work. It goes to what Councilmember Nurse mentioned. Since there is a PEG, is the PEG in any way going to affect the efficiency and capability? Because I personally think, as a former commissioner, that is a long time, 7 years out from the paid sick leave law being enacted. That's a long time to have cases ongoing for relatively small restitution amounts 7 years out. When we first did the division, obviously, we had to build it up, but now it's been 7 years. So I would hope that we could try to work with the agency to get either increased restitution amounts and also decrease the time it's taking to close out investigations. And then a follow-up question I have is how many companies have been fined? So how many companies have been fined? And is there a difference between companies that have union employees versus non-union employees?
I do want to just jump in just to reiterate the point that the averages, I think, are skewing a little bit of the perception of how long certain cases are taking to close out for the Office of Labor Policy and Standards. And we're happy to follow up offline to talk to perhaps identify some of those outlier cases that the Deputy Commissioner alluded to in his response, where particularly contentious cases can take quite a bit of time to resolve, which then will affect the average. So I don't want to misrepresent how long it takes for this office to complete its work. And just on the PEG and the resources question, this agency was just recently resourced to do its to fulfill its most recent mandate around delivery work. Our Deputy Commissioner has mentioned that we're confident in fulfilling our mandates as currently constituted, but I don't want that to be misrepresented to the council in the matter that if there are additional mandates that the council contemplates and passes, those could, not definitely, but could impact resourcing for this division, and that should be a consideration through the deliberative and legislative process. I'll hand it back to the Deputy Commissioner for your last question, Council Member.
Thank you, Steve. And you and I were thinking of the same two points there. On the union question, I think you asked how it was different in the context of a union or a CBA. If I'm understanding that right, the way the paid safe and sick leave law works is it applies to all private sector workers in New York City. However, there is a carve out for certain circumstances when there is a CBA in place in the workplace. For a limited number of industries, grocery being grocery and construction, if you have a CBA that waives the paid safe and sick leave law, then it does not apply anymore to those workers who are covered by that CBA. Outside of those two industries, the carve out works a little bit differently. It requires both that the CBA have a waiver of the paid safe and sick leave law, but also that there be a comparable benefit contained within the CBA. And provided there is a comparable benefit and a waiver, then those workers covered by that CBA would also be exempted from the paid safe and sick leave law.
Okay, thank you. I know my time is up, so I'm going to go back to second round. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Menon. We'll now hear from Councilmember Brewer. You may begin.
Time will begin.
Thank you very much. As the author of the original paid sick days, I could give you that carve out in my speech. So I appreciate very much, Deputy Commissioner. A couple of issues. When I was recently at a Chipotle rally with 32BJ, they were actually implementing or trying to, a state law, which as I understand, a brand new law, you probably know what this is, that there can be a worker group to work with management. It's something that has just been passed and they're trying to make sure it gets implemented. So I guess generally, because there are a lot of state and city laws on labor, how do you coordinate with the state on something like that, or just generally? Because I know that we all want workers to succeed, we want companies to succeed, but sometimes there's lack of coordination. Second, quickly, is also when does something, and I should know this, but as borough president, we had a construction safety task force, which the unions kindly worked with us on. And a lot of the issues were construction in the DA's office. So I'm just wondering, when does something get referred to the DA's office that I don't know the answer to that. And then just finally, much of our city, as we know, is complaint based. So, but you very kindly said that if there's one situation, you're likely, if there seems like there are more in one company, then you will take a follow-up and look more closely. But I'm just wondering, are there any situations within the context of your agency where you would go, I don't want to say looking for trouble, because that's not what I'm trying to say, but knowing that there are some issues in an area that you might see if there are challenges? I guess that's my question. Those are my three.
Thank you. If I could just, I'm not sure I am aware of the law that you were referring to on your first question, a state law that
there's a new law. The chair, De La Rosa, may know, but basically, as I understand it, it gives the opportunity for fast food workers in particular to work with, to get a committee. I'm sure there's a term, and I'm not calling it correctly, to committee with management so that they can work out some of their issues. So just so you know, apparently it's just passed. I don't think the regs have been written, which is probably why you don't know about it. But the unions are trying to implement it. And it seems to me to make sense. Why wouldn't, discussion should take place. The same problem we have with owners and tenants. Nobody wants to talk to anybody. So this would mandate discussion. Just FYI, I don't think the regs have been written, but it might be an overlap on some of the work that you're doing. So if you don't know about it, that's fine, but I just didn't know generally, sometimes OSHA comes in on the federal level. Sometimes you're involved. Sometimes it's the state involved. And so I've had situations in manufacturing where I know OSHA's involved and the city didn't know. So I'm just wondering how that all works in our city.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I'm going to be honest, you're breaking news for me. I'm not familiar with that state law, so I can't comment specifically on that. But I can speak to your more general question around coordination with other agencies. So we do work regularly with the State Department of Labor. Just as an example, and we have overlapping jurisdiction with them now on paid safe and sick leave in New York City. So we've had ongoing communication with them around that. We also, for a long time, have referred cases to the Department of Labor that are outside our jurisdiction. So let's say there's a wage hour issue we get. We have like a very streamlined way of getting that information to DOL. And, DOL I'm using as an example, but for us, the ability to work effectively with other enforcement agencies is definitely something that we put resources into. We have prioritized building those relationships so that we can easily share information and coordinate if there are overlapping issues that we're working on in a workplace. I think that's actually in a nice segue into your second question on district attorney's offices.
Yeah.
So really what goes to a district attorney's office will depend on the district attorney's priorities. Labor crime enforcement is a relatively new phenomenon. I think, again, New York City is like a little bit ahead of the game here in terms of doing it. So we do have relationships with several of the DA's offices in the city where we are able to send complaints to them, based on what we understand about their priorities and what they are looking to do in the labor crime space. And I would also just note briefly that in terms of criminal jurisdiction, there is one other player in New York City, which is the State Attorney General's office, which has its own original criminal jurisdiction for labor crimes. Can I just respond to the final question from the council member?
Sure.
You also asked about affirmative, proactive enforcement.
Right.
We spend a lot of time thinking about compliance and what is going to create the right incentives for compliance with employers. This all ties together with the resource questions and other things we've discussed today. We do not have the ability to be in every workplace. So what we need to do is create incentives that are going to encourage employers to comply. To do that, we need to have as many different tools in our toolbox as possible. And one of those is affirmative enforcement. And what I mean by that is our ability to start a case without having received any complaint whatsoever. We have that authority, both in the charter, I believe, and then also it's often restated in the substantive laws that we enforce. DCWP has authority to initiate its own investigations. And we think that's a really important tool to be using. I'm sure, given that you're asking the question, you're familiar with the research from David Weil, the former wage hour administrator for the U.S. Department of Labor. But we subscribe to his view that it is important to look beyond complaints and be able to go into other workplaces, because there are a variety of reasons why in high violation industries, those complaints may not be coming to you. So it's an important tool for us. We have exercised it. I'd say the most prominent example is our recently concluded initiative in the home healthcare industry, but it's an important tool for us.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Menon. I'll now call on Councilmember Nurse. You may begin.
Time will begin.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't see the unmute. Toggling between tabs. So thank you. I just had one other question. If you could maybe give an update on the Teamster strike at the UMEC. It's been quite a bit of time. And I know you all do business with their companies. I'm just curious if there's any update from you all and your involvement in that.
I cannot speak to that. I will say as like a structural matter, DCWP and the city generally does not have enforcement or legal authority in the context of a unionization campaign or a strike. We do affirm workers' rights to organize and bargain collectively and join together. And I would go even a step further and say that we view that as one of the core rights that workers have. But we do not have a formal role in that process. And I cannot personally speak to the status of the campaign that you're referring to. It's possible that there may be other people in other agencies who could, but I cannot.
Councilmember Nurse, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was like, I can't unmute myself. Thank you so much. I guess I'm just curious if when there are these types of issues going on, how the city relates to it in terms of their contracting. How are companies who are in these kinds of disputes or have repeated records, just a general overall of labor violations, how are we overlaying that data with the city and how the city decides on contracts or selecting bids and things like that. I guess I'd really love to hear a little bit more. And I'm sorry if this is fully out of your jurisdiction. I just would like to learn a little bit more about it.
No, it's a fair and good question. It is unfortunately not something I can speak to. We do not have a role like in the general contracting and procurement process citywide. Obviously we do on specific things that we are working on, but I think it would really be the Mayor's Office of Contract Services that is probably best placed to speak to your question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Menon.
Hi, I just had one last question. In terms of delivery workers and the new legislation, I'd love to hear about outreach because, for example, when we launched a paid sick leave law, we were required to have materials in 8 languages. We opted to do 26 languages. So I'd love to see what is the agency doing around delivery workers in terms of language access. Are you going above and beyond the law as we did with paid sick leave to do many more languages?
Yes, I believe we will be. I cannot tell you we are there right now. I alluded earlier to what we had been doing in terms of initially creating Know Your Rights materials for workers. That has been translated, I think now, currently it was, I think 5 languages to start. We are certainly going to be going well beyond that. Steve may be able to speak to ultimately how many there will be. If not, we could follow up with you after confirming with our communications team. But I can tell you as a general matter, we definitely go above and beyond what's required in terms of the number of languages. And certainly I would expect that to be the case here, given that this is such a diverse sector of workers. And then separately, in terms of outreach, we've been working very close with a wide array of worker organizations in this space. Certainly Worker Justice Project, Los Deliveristas Unidos, Movimiento de Repartidores, DRUM, and other groups. We've been going out with them in the field to meet with workers directly to hear from them about what they're experiencing. We've also been participating in a series of live webinars online, both to give kind of a general overview of what's coming with these laws, but primarily to spend that time in questions and answers with workers. I think for us, it's incredibly helpful to hear what their questions are, what's not clear, what may be confusing or challenging, but also to, as best we can, respond to those on the spot. And then where we can't, make sure that we're going back to do the work to try and develop answers where needed.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, only a segment of the protections for delivery workers is effective right now. There are a suite of new protections that will be coming online on April 22nd. As the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, I think we have about 4 or 5 languages that are available right now for delivery worker rights, but it is our full intent to have to go above and beyond what local law requires, certainly by the time the April effective dates go into place. For us, and again, this speaks to our strategic outreach and prerogatives, we prioritized really the most predominant languages as informed by what stakeholders tell us, and that includes Bengali, Spanish, Chinese, as the ones that we wanted to have right out of the gate on day 1. And then, of course, the other languages will be online over the course of several weeks.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over now to Chair De La Rosa for additional questions.
Thank you. I want to recognize that we've been joined by Councilmember Mealy. So I do have additional questions. Obviously, the committee is very interested in what's happening with fast food workers across our city right now. And I wanted to ask about the Just Cause legislation that the council passed in 2021. And I wanted to know, what is the number of complaints that DCWP has received from fast food workers concerning the violations of the city's just cause laws?
Sure. So to date, we've received 3 complaints specifically about the just cause provisions from workers. The first of those has been resolved, and that, we announced that probably a couple of months ago. The just cause law, just to kind of step back for a moment, the provisions went into effect in July. And that was, generally speaking, that's when workers have these rights. Our authority to investigate and enforce kicked in a couple months later in September. So it's since September 2021 that we've had enforcement authority, and that's the time period I'm referring to when I tell you that we've had 3 complaints so far.
So of the 3, how many were substantiated as of today?
Well, two are still active matters. So I'm there's not that much that I can say about those specifically, though obviously the fact that they continue to be active means they have passed through this initial threshold vetting that we would do. And then obviously the one that resolved was substantiated. And in that case, we were able to get full back pay, plus some additional money for the 2 workers who had been unjustly fired. One of the things the just cause law does is also prioritizes reinstatement. Just cause is about keeping your job. So the preferred remedy is for the worker to be able to go back to work. In that particular case, the workers had moved on and were not interested in going back, but we were able to get them a very good back pay amount in a fairly quick timeline. I think the start to finish, that might have been 2 months, possibly even a little bit shorter.
And has the Office of Labor and Policy Standards updated the complaint intake form to include a complaint category for fast food workers that are reporting violations to just cause?
It is on our complaint form, which has been updated recently. I don't believe it specifically calls out just cause. Just cause was passed as an amendment to the Fair Workweek law, so it's part of that kind of larger rubric. But there is a category for Fair Workweek complaints from fast food workers.
To your knowledge, does the administration support expanding just cause protections to other private sector industry beyond fast food workers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. What the city has done for fast food workers in New York City is groundbreaking. There is one other jurisdiction, one other city that is in the country that has a just cause law in Philadelphia that covers a much smaller population of workers than fast food in New York City. So this is a very new type of right. It also, and I'm pleased to be able to say this, was recently upheld against a legal challenge by the U.S. District Court for the Southern District, which found that it was not an undue interference with the collective bargaining and unionization process for New York City to be able to regulate in this area. Now that obviously there are still additional steps that need to play out in that legal process before that becomes a final decision. But very, very positive about New York's ability to pass these types of laws. And in terms of what just cause does, it really gives workers due process in the workplace. It gives them a chance to know that they're not going to get fired for no reason. They're not going to get fired because their manager is angry and their boss is pissed off. They have a right to a process before they lose their jobs. And even though just cause as a regulatory framework is very new, the idea of just cause is not. This has existed in collective bargaining agreements for quite some time. And I think there is a long track record showing that this can be implemented. And this is manageable and operational for employers. All that being said, I think with respect to expansion, we certainly would be open to discussing with council areas for expansion. I think, in the fast food context, we had a fairly well-developed record about working conditions and industry conditions that made it very clear why this would be an important protection. And I think if we were talking about expanding, we would love to engage a little bit just to understand the specifics of how and where council was interested in doing that.
Great, we certainly welcome that conversation for expansion. Moving over to wage theft. As you know, wage theft is an epidemic in New York City. Workers across frontline industries, from the nail salon workers to construction sites, are not fully compensated for their earned wages, overtime pay, and working off the clock. Are there specific industries or sectors of the workforce where wage theft is more prevalently reported than others?
Yes, and let me just start by saying that wage theft is a very important issue to me. That's what I've spent the majority of my career as an attorney doing, is representing low-wage workers on wage theft claims. That being said, obviously, New York City, under the current legal framework, does not have authority to enforce or set minimum wage standards. That authority resides right now with New York State and the federal government. We do, however, obviously get a lot of inquiries. This is one of the most prominent issues that comes into us that gets referred out through our intake process. And in terms of the industries where wage theft is most common, there's a good deal of research out there that can be far more precise than I can on this. But typically you see it in low-wage industries, also oftentimes in industries with high concentrations of immigrant workers. And we're talking about service jobs, so home care, childcare, restaurant jobs, whether it's delivery, dishwashers, food prep, line cooks, kind of the whole gamut of what you see in the food service sector. Construction is another prominent industry. Laundry workers, nail salon technicians, garment workers. Those are the ones that stand out to me. And kind of the common themes are typically low-wage jobs, high concentration of an immigrant workforce, and particularly prevalent in service sectors.
I also just want to point out and underscore something that our deputy commissioner noted, is that while we as a municipality do not have the authority to enforce wage theft, over the course of our investigations over matters that we do enforce, if we come across things that are outside of our jurisdiction, that's where those relationships between jurisdictions, as the deputy commissioner mentioned, are the state's Department of Labor, for example. Those relationships, those referrals are critical. Our work is not siloed in that way, and as we define ourselves at DCWP and the Office of Labor Policy and Standards in particular, we're a resource to all New Yorkers on issues relating to workplace issues. So if they come to us, they will get referred and paid attention to, regardless of really what the jurisdictional issue may be. So I don't want that to go unsaid or unnoticed in this hearing.
And if I can just follow up with a specific example to Steve's point, I referenced earlier our home healthcare initiative, where we exercised our affirmative authority. The last case that was resolved was, by far the largest. It was actually the largest resolution we've had to date. And that involved starting out by looking at paid sick leave. But in the course of that, we identified wage hour violations in a variety of home care industries. At a variety of home health agencies. And what we did was we referred those to the State Attorney General's office and actually turned it into a joint enforcement action where we worked together with them throughout the enforcement process, with them kind of focusing on the wage hour issues while we, on a parallel track, were handling the paid safe and sick leave issues. So just to Steve's point, that we are looking for creative ways to be able to impact wage theft, even without currently having that authority ourselves.
Yeah, that leads to my next question, which was understanding that the state plays a larger role. What local remedies or policies do you propose that we employ to reduce wage theft?
So I don't think that we have any specific policies to propose today with respect to that. We certainly are actively having conversations, on a variety of workplace issues right now, but probably nothing that is ripe for discussion today. What I can say is I think obviously through coordination with other agencies, that's something we can do as DCWP. I think as well, if you look back to the prior administration, there was I think, very important but non-legal role that the mayor played with respect to promoting the move to a $15 minimum wage for New York State. So there are certainly ways that we can talk about it and impact the calculus and potentially promote, stronger protections at the state or federal level. But with respect to actual legislation, we do have a fairly significant constraint right now in terms of the legal landscape.
Great. And then asking about workforce development programs, many have called for the revamp of the city's workforce development programs to help New Yorkers of color compete for quality jobs. Does your department collaborate with the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development at all? And are there any policy recommendations for improving workforce development programs?
I do not feel that I am in a position to recommend policies for workforce development. We have certainly worked collaboratively with workforce development over the last several years. I think there are also opportunities there to build a stronger working relationship. And I think particularly looking at the moment we're in at this point in the crisis, I think there is a slightly different lens with which we can look at workforce development right now. There is an opportunity and really a reorientation around our workforce where I think you're right to highlight that, and that is an important partner for us going forward.
And our agency does work closely with the Mayor's Office for Workforce Development. And again, like our work, whether it's interdivisional here or interagency, is not siloed. Like, for example, with Workforce Development, we're working very closely with them right now on our free tax prep programs and services to ensure that workers that meet the income thresholds and their employers partner with us to kind of promote these free preparation services. So, in short, yes, we have a good working relationship with them, but as the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, like in terms of like broader policies that really impact their bailiwick, we would probably have to defer to them.
Thank you. And then my final question is a clarifying question about the deliveristas. Has the department started enforcing the food delivery worker protections as of now? Are you all enforcing?
So as of right now, there is a limited number of worker protections that have gone into effect starting on January 24th. That's the date on which the licensing framework took effect. Embedded within the licensing scheme were protections for workers requiring greater disclosure from apps around tips being left by customers, and also disclosure requirements for total pay and tips for the prior day. So that's kind of one category with additional disclosures around pay and compensation. The second was better access to bathrooms at restaurants where workers are picking up deliveries. Those provisions went into effect on January 24th. We are, open and ready to enforce. Our intake is prepared for those. The rest of the protections, as I think Steve mentioned earlier, go into effect on April 22nd is kind of the bulk of what was passed last year for worker protection. And then towards the end of the year is the minimum pay rate. And obviously right now we're engaged in a study process looking ahead to that date.
We are educating. I just want to note that although we're not enforcing those provisions that don't go into effect until April, we are educating workers on those provisions, and the collateral that we have translated into Chinese, into Bangla, to Spanish, and other critical languages that are affecting this industry, do note and partition off like what's effective now, what will be effective in a couple of months. And we've worked very closely, of course, with the Deputy Commissioner and his team, along with stakeholders like Workers' Justice Project and others, to ensure that those talking points, our messaging, is clear and concise, so that workers know what's available to them and what will be available to them in a matter of weeks.
So I did visit with some deliveristas locally in my community just 2 Fridays ago, and they do still continue to have concerns and really complaints about the access to bathrooms. One suggestion that I do have, which is a more of an interagency coordination, but maybe we can work with SBS and Chamber on the Go or some of those initiatives to bring multilingual information to some of our small business owners so that they're aware of the change in regulation and their that they need to let the deliveristas use the restrooms. There was also, just to flag, many concerns about the deliveristas being victims to crimes in our community, and that's an issue that, you know, I know this is not the forum for, but I wanted to flag for you all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think certainly, you know, if there are delivery workers that you are hearing from who have questions or want to file complaints, like, please encourage them to contact us. We would love to talk to them. And then with respect to the safety issues that you referenced, you know, I think certainly we are aware of those, and it's obviously a very important issue throughout this industry, and is something that the city, you know, is working on in kind of a more holistic, bigger picture way that is certainly much broader than our agency.
Great, thank you. Bianca, do we have any other questions from members?
No, I do not see any more hands. I just wanted to recognize that we've been joined by Councilmember Caban. She has joined us. And seeing as there are no other questions, we are going to conclude our administration testimony. I want to thank the members of the administration that came to testify today. I will now be turning to public testimony. I'd like to remind everyone that we will be calling on individuals to speak one by one. Each panelist will be given 3 minutes to speak. After I call on your name, panelists, a member of our staff will unmute you. There may be a few seconds of delay before you are unmuted, and we thank you in advance for your patience. Please wait a brief moment for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom. Sorry, everyone, get tripped up on that line. I will call on you after the panel has completed their testimony in the order in which you raise your hand. I would like to now welcome Vincent Alvarez. After Vincent Alvarez, we'll be hearing from Henry Girardi. After Henry, we'll be hearing from Charlene Oberner. Vincent, you may begin when the timer begins.
You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair De La Rosa and members of the Council's Committee on Civil Service and Labor. My name is Vincent Alvarez, and I'm president of the New York City Central Labor Council, AFL-CIO. I'm joined today by various affiliates of the CLC who will be submitting their own testimony focused on issues impacting their specific members and industries. My testimony will focus on the status of New York City's workers more generally. The CLC appreciates the attention the Council and the Committee are giving to understanding the state of workers in all sectors of the New York City economy and making it the subject of the first hearing of this committee. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the inequalities which are present in our economy that are hurting the city's working families. While many white-collar workers were able to, and in many cases continue to still work remotely, for many essential workers that simply was not an option. On the front lines from the early days of the pandemic through the waves of the Delta and Omicron variants, thousands of essential workers, both municipal employees and private sector workers, contracted COVID-19 and hundreds died while also serving this city and keeping it running. Moreover, even with so many of these workers having protections of collective bargaining agreement, health insurance, retirement benefits, job protections, and a mechanism to ensure a safe workplace, and life-saving protective equipment, we were still prepared to meet the demands. We were still ill prepared to meet the demands of the crisis and adequately compensate our workers. Nevertheless, there were also thousands of workers with no such protections, and we must be prepared to do better. Although the worst of the pandemic seems to be behind us, the disparity between workers in unionized and non-unionized workplaces is not. And if we are ever to truly recover from the pandemic, the recovery must be broad, equitable, and attainable by all. Empowering and protecting workers should be a moral imperative and sufficient reason to focus on these issues. But there are also significant policy and economic benefits to doing so that could result in higher wages and benefits, safe workplaces, less dependence on government-provided benefits, and workers engaging collectively and democratically to determine the terms and conditions of their employment. I'm encouraged that during this period of great strife, we're also seeing a tremendous increase in worker actions. It should not come as much of a surprise that in order to respond to the challenges of the pandemic and protect their rights, workers across the city have turned to the labor movement to help secure a voice at work. Workers United is organizing Starbucks workers not only in New York City and Long Island, but throughout the country. The RWDSU is supporting workers of REI Soho to combat the union busting tactics that the company has employed. Workers at the American Museum of Natural History filed a petition with the NLRB to be represented by DC 37 last month. Staff at the New York Times and the Financial Times are organizing, and leaked messages reveal
Time has expired.
that leaked messages.
You can continue, sorry.
Yeah, I've got another minute. I'll be quick, thanks. And leaked messages reveal that the New York Times employed an aggressive anti-union strategy in response. And in Brooklyn, the Teamsters continued to be on strike at United Metro Energy for nearly a year. Lastly, the CLC is very encouraged by progressive messages emanating from all corners of the council and looks forward to integrating the work of our affiliates in order to advance that agenda. It is also important, however, to remind the council of the longstanding dispute at Charter Spectrum, where 1,600 members have been on strike for several years. Just as the franchise process can be used effectively to create and protect high-quality jobs, it can also, in the case of Charter Spectrum, be used to destroy those same jobs. In every situation where workers are trying to improve their lots, city government has the opportunity to assist their efforts and fulfill the original intent of the NLRB to encourage collective bargaining. Indeed, there are many recent examples where the city government has done just that. In the last term, the city council passed a number of worker protection laws that directly and immediately improve the lives of workers, from labor peace requirements for city contractors to displaced hotel worker severance law to prohibiting the wrongful discharge or layoffs of fast food workers. So this council has an opportunity to continue passing similar laws that will improve the conditions for city's workers. To that end, the New York City Central Labor Council and our affiliates, we welcome the opportunity to work with you in doing that, and I encourage you to speak to us regularly and in advance so that we may collaborate in designing the most effective ways to support workers. And once again, thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alvarez. I'm sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No problem.
We're on the same page. Thank you, Bianca.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinny, for coming. I do have a few questions if you have a few more minutes for us. First, thank you for really framing and laying the framework for what is happening across our city and really across the nation with union workers and employers who are refusing to adhere to the rights of workers. I do have a question, which is, can you tell us a little bit more about the impact the pandemic has had on your workers? You mentioned that hundreds of workers died, your affiliate workers, and also any recommendations for ways that the city council can continue to work to protect and strengthen the right of union workers.
Hold on one second. Hold on. Sorry, Mr. Alvarez, you're muted. Give me 1 second so we can get you unmuted.
Great, thank you. Well, I would say the first thing is we're still going through, of course, the pandemic, so we will have to do everything that we can to continue to protect workers, and we need to make sure that continues to happen. With respect to organizing workers, what we could do is, I think there, as was said with the previous panelists, the labor laws are complex, but it has always been the job of government dating back to the original National Labor Relations Act to do everything they can to actually encourage, not just create a fair and level playing field, but it's in statute to encourage collective bargaining. I think that there are certainly things they could do with respect to maintaining that playing field when it comes to labor peace and labor harmony and supporting that in actions that the city council has taken in the past and is going to continue to pass. I think that is critically important. We have 68% of the country it's a high watermark for support for unionization. About 60 million Americans today say they would join a union if they had the possibility to do that. Laws are important. To pass good legislation is very important. It's important to make sure that we have the funding to enforce those laws, but nothing can supplement or replace the collective bargaining agreement, because that is what enforces the contract. Even after the law is passed, we have people who have a union contract. The unions go in, they do an unbelievable job. The unions around the city as the strongest and the largest labor movement in the country at making sure that the laws are actually being enforced and the terms and the conditions of a contract are actually being enforced. So there is a lot of discretionary action that certainly the city council can take, beginning, as I said, with supporting labor peace, at the very least, labor peace in many of the different sectors of our economy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to now turn it to Henry Gerardo. Henry, you may begin when the timer starts.
Your time will begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee and those who are testifying today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Henry Garrido. I'm the Executive Director, District Council 37, the largest municipal union representing 150,000 members and about 100,000 retirees and their families. So I thank you for the courage you have to have this hearing today. For the interest of time, I want to start with the part that Vinny ended, which is regarding the health and safety of workers. So I have the dubious distinctions of representing a union has lost more members due to COVID-19 than any other union. In fact, that all other unions combined, in accordance with the records, nearly 500 DC-37 members lost their lives as a result of COVID-19. That is not an accident. That is because 100,000 out of the 150,000 people I represent were deemed essential and were required to work, not just work on a daily basis, but continue to work when agencies were closed and they're frontline workers. So for them, we owe them a debt of gratitude, but we also owe them the obligation to protect workers and making sure that as we continue, workers are provided with the proper protection equipment and the necessary health and safety rules that go beyond just the labor safety. So I urge this committee to continue to highlight and to potentially hold hearings about the city's preparedness for a new pandemic and the ongoing pandemic that we have now, particularly when it comes to equipment that we should be procuring. Way too many respiratory therapists died as a result of not having filters for poppers that we're providing and once they were intubating patients. So I want to highlight and put that to your attention. Secondly, I'd like to talk today about Local Law 87, a law that was passed last year by the City Council that has been known as labor peace. Labor peace is a way of union of members or potential members having the ability to organize in a union without the fear of harassment, the fear of termination, the fear of having an employer holding over their heads that they will be terminated or disciplined for seeking the opportunity to join a union. Labor peace is not a project labor agreement, although I'm fully supportive of those. It's an ability for the majority of workers to do it, as I said, without expecting the employer, in this case, nonprofit sector employers to be able to harass workers as they do. I will leave it there since the matter is now in litigation after in December 28th, the Health and Human Services sector filed a lawsuit trying to implement the implementation of the law of labor peace. But this has been done already in 3 states, and we think it's a good way in order to allow union members or workers to join into a union. Thirdly, I like to concentrate on the issue of wage theft because that is so important. And wage theft is not a matter or a violation that is subject to the private sector. We've seen it in the public sector, specifically on city contracts. So if the city engages in contracts with workers, with providers that then take workers' salary away, which includes cost of living adjustments passed on to the employers and not passed on to the workers. I think that the city should reinvigorate the investigations of wage theft within the city's contracting ability. And lastly, and I will conclude with this, thank you for your indulgence, another 30 seconds, is I think this committee should concentrate on the misclassification of workers. Way too many workers are being misclassified as independent, as temps, as other independent workers who are actually working every day and should be classified as workers every day. This deprives money for the workers' compensation benefit. It deprives money on taxes. It puts the workers at risk with not having a protection. Those protections that you talked about to this committee that were implemented, whether it's sick leave or otherwise, and all the benefits are achieved by the city council. If they're independent workers, they're not entitled to it. So we believe the city should do that, especially on the almost $20 billion of contract that is procuring today. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
I think we're going to wait for the chair's questions after the other panelist gives their testimony, Henry. So she'll probably have some questions. I'm going to turn to Charlene now, and Charlene, you may begin when the timer starts.
I appreciate that. I would just say for the record, it's very hard for a union leader to talk within 3 minutes. Just saying.
Under advisement, we will note that for the next hearing. Thanks so much, Henry. Charlene, when the timer starts, you may begin your testimony.
The time will begin.
Hi, thank you to Chair and Councilwoman De La Rosa for holding this hearing. My name is Charlene Obernauer, and I run the nonprofit, the New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health. And we do education, training, and research and advocacy to improve workplace health and safety conditions. And we've been advocating for timely and accurate tracking of worker fatalities for decades, particularly around the construction fatalities report that we released, Deadly Skyline, which we first published in 2014. And I don't have to tell this to our chair, but at the end of 2020, a bill sponsored by Senator Jessica Ramos in the Senate and then Assemblywoman Carmen De La Rosa was signed into law. The legislation required that employers submit key information to the New York State Department of Labor when a construction worker dies on the job. This information would then be made available to the public via a searchable database. Although the bill is not yet law, it has yet to be implemented. Although the bill is now law, it is yet to be implemented. Requiring reporting of workplace fatalities is extremely important, and here's why. Data allows us to analyze trends. So if there's an increase in fatality, we're able to look at that information and to some extent figure out why. But now we're analyzing Bureau of Labor Statistics data that's 2 years old. Our last construction fatalities report looked at data of construction fatalities from 2020. So when there is an increase or a decrease, we're often 2 years too late from establishing new policies that could protect workers from further unsafe conditions that could cause deaths on the job. We look at data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, New York City Department of Buildings, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and media reports. But we don't have one centralized place where this data is available. And like I said, it isn't available quickly enough. At the beginning of every council meeting, the speaker reads out the names of workers' lives lost in the past month due to the data that we collect with our partners at the New York City Central Labor Council. But many names are missing. We urge this committee to look into mandating employers to report on lives lost on the job. Thank you. Oh, wow. I have a minute. So if any of these union leaders want to step in.
We're actually going to turn to Chair De La Rosa. Thank you so much, Charlene. And Chair De La Rosa is going to ask the panelists some questions.
Thank you.
Chair, your floor.
Yes. Thank you so much for your testimony. My questions right now are going to be for Henry Garrido. Thank you, Henry, for your detailed testimony. One of the questions that I had, just for the record, I know that your union, your affiliates, your workers have been some of the most impacted frontline workers in the city. And I want to know what your union accomplished in the last 2 years on behalf of the membership.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start with the legislation that we pursued and pushed in Albany to allow for those workers and their families to be able to apply without the need of overly burdened requirements in Albany has been one of the leading ones. For instance, we found that many of the workers who died from COVID-19 could not get a traditional death certificate because there were issued original legislation required or as proposed require a New York State doctor to be able to issue that and a primary physician to do that. When we know that in many instances, the death certificates were issued by physician assistant and by doctors coming from other states. So we were able to push a change in that legislation that I thought was critical. Also, there are many times where those death certificates do not say COVID-19 as the cause of death, even though COVID-19 was the underlying. In many instances, you would see respiratory failure. It could have been other pieces, right, as a result of it, when the real underlying reasons, even though the doctor explained it, was COVID-19. So we make sure that we promulgate it and help promulgate rules that allow for workers and their families to apply for that, whether they were applying for permanent disability or ordinary disability or death benefit, as more of it sound, is something that we're very proud of. I mean, changing the way that the health and safety is implemented citywide was another piece that we pushed. I mentioned the issue of PAPRs because everybody was concentrating as PPs, as gloves, you know, issues of sanitizers and masks and things of that nature. But the reality is there were, of the people who died, if you do a deeper dive on the number of people who died, you know, we were getting equipment from the federal government that were respiratory nation when you have the sickest patients, and we didn't have any filters on it. I mean, what good was it to have a complete hazmat popper suit if you don't have the filter that goes on there in the back? And we saw that, and what we tried to do, when we try to procure those equipments, we were halted and say, well, the government doesn't have enough, or it should only be for doctors and nurses, when in fact, you have respiratory therapists, you have lab workers, you have people who are working in the front line that should have been provided with that equipment. So I think highlighting that was also important. And also, I have to say, now I think we work really hard to highlight the work, not just of the professional titles, but cooks and cleaners and custodians and people who are the salt of the earth, who kept the city going and have kept the city going, finally got some recognition that being essential didn't mean having a title or having a degree, that you could be essential to the city and still be a cleaner in a facility. And so we're very proud of the fact that we stood up for those workers at a time when they needed the most. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Henry. And the final question that I have for you is, are there any recommendations for improving the city's workforce development programs, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you look at the contract budget, we spend about $200 million in workforce development. Very less than 10% of that is spent within the city's workforce. In fact, the city spent $25 per worker up until last year when we put money on the out of collective bargaining to be able to train workers. Engineers, architects, bookkeepers only got $2.50. Let me repeat that. $2.50 an hour in their training fund per year to be trained. That is utterly ridiculous. It requires workers to come into pocket, take money out of their pockets to pay to be trained on a degree or certification that the city needs to operate in the first place. So we can't do that. And I see Jeff here from Climate Jobs New York. As we're preparing a new workforce of green renewable energy, as we're preparing to just change the complete transformation of the economy, we need to have a better trained workforce that recognizes that the world is changing around us, that the need to train those workers in the new economy has to come with a commitment from the city to make sure that the public workers are just as cared for and included as the private workers in the private sector are.
Thank you for your thoughts. And then I have a question now for Charlene. First, I want to thank you, Charlene, for bringing up the construction workers and the worker fatalities. We know that the construction industry continues to be one of the deadliest industries in New York State. And I was proud to be the lead sponsor, along with Senator Jessica Ramos, for the fatalities bill that we passed. You mentioned that it still has not been still hasn't been enforced. Can you speak to what the city council can do in this role to make sure that we are accurately reporting on these deaths and supporting the state legislation?
Definitely. Thanks so much. And I think that one of the whole premise behind this hearing is that New York City has really strong laws. The same goes for New York State. We have some really great laws, but oftentimes employers don't follow them. And so I think there needs to be an emphasis to construction employers that this is now law in New York State and that they have to do reporting. So that could be a partnership between different agencies in New York City to do education around this so that they really know what the law is and what the law says. Because, if you have a law and nobody follows it, it doesn't really make that impact. So that would be really important.
Thank you so much. I want to now hand it back to our committee counsel for questions from members.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are now going to turn to council member questions. I see a few hands raised. I just want to remind council members, if you have a question for a particular panelist, to use the Zoom raise hand function. I got it right this time. So I'm now going to turn to council member Menon. And then after council member Menon, we'll hear from council member Botcher.
Time starts now.
I want to thank everyone for their testimony today. I had two questions for Henry Garrido. The first is, you spoke so passionately about the death of your members due to COVID. What steps should the city have taken, in your opinion, that we should take now in the event of another pandemic to protect your workers?
Thank you, Councilwoman, for the question. The first steps that I think we have to be is have a policy across the board with all agencies that is consistent in its application. At a time where COVID was raging, the Department of Health and Human Resource Administration did not and would not have forced mask wearing to a clients coming in. It became optional, where all the workers had to meet clients face to face. We knew by then that kind of transmission was the most immediate, right? So why not have a policy that anybody coming into a food stamps or a Medicaid office or any of the offices seeking, services from the city, where the clients would have to wear it for their protection of all the clients. That was left completely up to every agency to determine its own policy. I think that was a mitigating disaster, because every agency forced it in a way that they saw fit, and we had no consistency. Consistency is important. Secondly, even on the way that distribution of masks and other equipment was done, I think, again, inconsistency. I'll use an example of nurses who were intubating and helping kids and other in the school communities. The school nurses would have to go to the custodian, who then many of them got the equipment without any indication. It was no fault of their own, but without any indication how to distribute it, and began to ration the equipment, the hand sanitizers, the soap, even the pieces that were critical, without knowing how much of it is, because this was just simply not enough. And then you have nurses blaming the custodians for not having enough or distributing enough at a time where, as I said before, the pandemic was raging. And then lastly, the other thing that the city needs to do is health and safety is almost thought as an afterthought, right? You heard a lot of testimony here from the agencies. Health and safety is as critical to the workers in a pandemic as anything that they would have, right? And I see that Naika Ashio was really helpful in joining in partnership with us to try to promulgate rules and try to help the workers. But to be honest, it wasn't enough. Even with the resources with committee, even with NICASH and other agencies pushing for it, it just simply wouldn't be not enough. I think the city needs to make a commitment and put the money where its mouth is. If you want to protect workers, make sure that health and safety is protected as well, that it becomes a critical component for collective bargaining, not an afterthought. That is part of every agency emergency preparedness, that you have the workers do that. And that may include installing partitions in areas where there's interactions with the public, which were in many instances removed by the agencies because they didn't want to give the perception that they were in a sick environment. It may be social distancing in the future, not just for COVID, but for any other related disease. And it may be how you interact with the public in general. In many instances, you have those little cordon spaces where people walk through that were bunched against each other without any consideration for the safety of those workers or the clients themselves. So we need better citywide protection, more coordination, and more consistency.
Okay, thank you. And then that's really helpful recommendations for us. And then the last question I have for you is, you mentioned about the misclassification of workers. I agree. What are your recommendations on how we as a city council can rectify that?
Well, I can't speak on the private sector, but I can tell you that last year, this preliminary budget had $44 million worth of temporary employees. Most of those temporary employees are working every single day. They're coming in, their schedule's set up by an agency. The supervision, everything you mentioned is set up. That includes not only clerical administrative employees, but it includes building trades employees that are misclassified as temps. You have employees that are information technology employees who are not classified as consultants. I classified as independent contractors. If you include some of those IT workers, that's another $100 million of procurement the city is doing. And yet, even though the city has complete control on their schedules, on the time that start and the begin, on the wages,
Time expired.
they're still classified as independent. And the city needs to do more of its job of enforcing the rules on the dollars that it uses to procure these services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. I'm now going to call on Councilmember Botter.
Time starts now.
Hi, I just want to say to Mr. Alvarez and Mr. Garrido, please let us know how we can be further helpful as a council. The last city council was so active in supporting organized labor, and we want to be as well. I often say that in this country, the way that the economy has developed over the last few decades, it's very unusual for Americans to have any money saved up for retirement whatsoever, any kind of retirement security. And that's terrifying to me, especially as so many people are entering retirement now. And if folks do have a secure retirement, it's likely that they're union. So we have to do more to encourage union membership and grow union membership in New York City. And I want to be helpful with that in my own district. I look forward to working with you on that here in Council District 3 and on a legislative level. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Councilmember, if I could just make a quick point on the retirement security piece. You know, union members are there's a higher probability that they'll have a lot of the things that we've talked about today: higher wages, safety and health benefits, but also a retirement plan. When I started this job years ago, we had forums on retirement security in New York City. Fully 59% of workers in New York City have no retirement security plan whatsoever, and that was years ago. Today, it's about 65, maybe even a little bit higher, 66%, have no 401k plan, have no defined benefit pension plan. That is the best type of retirement plan for a lot of reasons that unions offer. And that is a slow motion crisis that is going to impact all of New York City. So wherever you can support, and in the most basic sense, to support the jobs that are going to provide those types of benefits, I think that is incumbent upon the city council to do that. It's in the best economic interest, not only of those workers, but of the city to do that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Council Chair De La Rosa, do you have any further questions for this panel? If not, we're going to turn to the second panel.
No, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone that just testified. We are now going to call on the second panel. Before I announce names, I just want to remind members of the public that the only committee members should use the Zoom raise hand function. If you have anything to say, you are registered to testify, you will have your moment. So we just ask that you not use the Zoom raise hand function because it's kind of confusing for staff to keep track of. But again, you will all have your time, and we thank you for your patience. So I would like to now welcome to testify Jennifer Sequeira, Ben Prosky, and Demos Demopoulos. Jennifer, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and holding this hearing. My name is Jennifer Sequeira. I'm a registered architect and practicing in the state of New York. I live in Jackson Heights, and I have been one of the leaders in a recent unionizing campaign at a renowned architecture firm here in New York City. My coworkers and I attempted to unionize our workplace and were defeated by a very strong anti-union campaign. I'm here today on behalf of my fellow architectural coworkers within our profession to testify on our precarious working conditions, as well as to ask for support as we exercise our right to organize and unionize our workplaces and to light the way for future organizing campaigns in progress and soon to be made public. I've wanted to become an architect since I was a child. I didn't know much of what the word meant, but I knew back in Brazil as a young girl that I wanted to bring some order to my father's never-ending construction project, what the rest of us in our family called home. As I got started on this career path, I was told to quit several times by my senior peers because of the profession's grueling working conditions, but I didn't listen. I was young and dead set on reaching my dream and becoming an architect. Fast forward 15 plus years since those early dreams and warnings, I've attended both undergrad and graduate school at UC Berkeley, received 2 degrees in architecture, studied 4, failed many, and finally passed 5-hour licensing exams, became licensed, and have worked for various private architecture firms for about 10 years. During both academia and practice, I have experienced the precarity of this profession. Besides working in a profession where all-nighters are mentioned in interviews, layoffs are often part of the business model. I've been laid off 3 times. The first 2 layoffs were due to the 2008 recession. The most recent layoff, November 30th, 2021, coincided with our unionizing campaign going public. Could it have been retaliation? I'll probably never know. In a nutshell, even though the media and the movies portray architects as having very established and well-to-do lives, that's far from the truth. The majority of us do not hold the privileges that the lucky few at the top, the firm owners, do. Some of the precarity we as workers experience stem from student debt. Entry into the profession is expensive, unpaid overtime, low salaries compared to other learned professions, misclassification as exempt workers. This is the case for some who make less than the federal minimum salary for guaranteed overtime, barely making above that floor, or fully unpaid interns. Underreporting of hours in order to keep clients' bills low, lack of representation of women, especially in leadership positions, and that signals a pay gap in comparison to male professionals. It also signals a lack of transparency in salary distribution and opaque promotion hierarchies, inadequate representation of BIPOC professionals, signaling entry.
Time expired.
Into.
You may finish, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. There's also a pay gap in comparison. And BIPOC professionals having generally lower income backgrounds. So there's an entry barrier there. And visa workers are fearful of voicing any inadequate working conditions as their immigration status is tied to their employment. I have 30 seconds left. It's unfortunate that a unionizing campaign so often needs to become a fight. When we planned out our campaign, we did not expect voluntary recognition, but we did not expect to be met with so much resistance. Our organizing committee, made up of a majority of women, had to face the anti-union campaign with the backing of deep pockets and a very expensive union-busting law firm. This is all very, very new within our profession, so we understand our first attempt had a high chance of failure. The last attempt to unionize within our profession was in the 70s, also failed due to employer intimidation and empty promises of better working conditions. And since then, there haven't been any elections on record since the NLRB got put together. So finally, having said all that, I just want to thank this committee and its guests for taking the time to listen to me today and the extra time there. I humbly ask that if any legislation is being considered that extends additional rights to more of the workforce in New York City, especially those that receive city contracts, that architectural workers are not left behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm now going to turn to Ben. Ben, you may begin when the clock starts.
Time starts now.
Thank you for holding this hearing today. I'm Ben Prosky, Executive Director of the American Institute of Architects New York, also known as AI New York. We represent New York City's public sector and private sector architects who are employed at government agencies, firms, and universities. Our members include unionized and non-unionized architects, as well as workers and management. And you just heard from a very courageous worker, Jennifer Segura, and I thank you, Jennifer, for speaking up. This hearing's topic is very timely since architects at some of New York City's architecture firms are in the process of unionizing. Support for unionization has arisen from the poor compensation architects receive, as well as the workplace issues working for lower wages create. The U.S. Department of Justice does not allow AIA New York to collectively bargain for our members or organize work stoppages. This means we cannot work within agencies, owners, and developers to set fair fees and wages for their employees. According to the 2021 AIA compensation report, the average salary in New York for a recent architecture school graduate is $58,000 per year. This is not enough to cover the hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt accrued over a decade of education, nor the high cost of living convenient to most offices. Comparatively, first-year associates at New York City law firms earn $215,000 per year. In addition to being underpaid, architects are pressed to work incredibly long hours. Agencies rarely receive sufficient funding or staffing, leading agency leadership to overwork their architects. Meanwhile, firms are unable to collectively bargain for fees, allowing owners and developers to set high work requirements for low fees. As a result, firm owners push their architects to work incredibly long hours, with 60 to 70-hour work weeks not being uncommon. Unionization in architecture is an important tool to strengthen workers' rights, but it will not solve many of the industry's core problems. Our unionized members at agencies are paid less than our non-unionized members at firms. For instance, the starting salary at the Department of Design and Construction for a junior project manager is $51,000 a year. Fortunately, council members can strengthen workers' rights for architects. They can assign larger budgets for agencies specifically to hire architects and pay architects higher wages. The council can also require that agencies stop demanding free work from architecture firms. Agencies regularly require a significant amount of upfront work from firms before awarding a contract, yet that work is not compensated. Combined with unionization, changes like these will create better working environments for architects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm now going to pass it off to Demos. Demos, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. I am Demos Demopoulos. I serve as Secretary Treasurer and Principal Officer of Teamsters Local 553. I'm also Secretary Treasurer of Teamsters Joint Council 16, 120,000 members in New York City. Thank you to Committee Chair De La Rosa and all members of the committee, all council members in attendance, all my brothers and sisters in labor, the Central Labor Council, and my brother and sister Teamsters. I'm here today to speak about essential workers on strike for a union contract for over 10 months at Brooklyn's United Metro Energy, owned by multi-billionaire John Catsimatidis. $153 million. That's how much money New York City has sent to United Metro Energy Corporation and John Catsimatidis in the last 9 years. Catsimatidis has won contracts to provide heating oil to public schools and other city agencies. But what has our government done to protect the rights of workers who fulfill these city contracts? These workers have been on strike for 10 months just to get the same wages and benefits that other workers in this industry get. They have been illegally fired. They have had their health care taken away. The company committed numerous violations of federal labor law, which are now pending in Washington, D.C. Catsimatidis also has not paid his drivers the prevailing wage required by the city and state law. But New York City checks keep flowing to the company. Worker abuse should not be treated as a business as usual by New York City government. When immigrants and workers of color are exploited, New York City public dollars should not be paying for it. In all my years in this union, which is 45, have never been on strike like this in the oil industry. This has been a middle-class job where workers treated with respect. These workers are fighting for a fair wage for their families but they're also fighting for the rest of us too. When the billionaires keep getting richer by shortchanging the workers, someone has to take a stand, and these workers are taking a stand. And I beg, if you don't mind, Chairperson De La Rosa, I have with me right now Andre Solin and Ivan Arizaga, two of the UMEC strikers that would like to make a very brief statement. Here I have Andre Solin.
Yes, my name is Andre Solin. Good afternoon. And I work at United Metro in Brooklyn. Thank you to the committee, Chair De La Rosa, and other City Council members for the opportunity to share my story today. I've been on strike for
Time expired.
I've been on strike for over 300 days. We're fighting for fair wages and fair treatment for our families. My coworkers and I have stayed on the job when the rest of the city was shut down during the pandemic. We made sure that the hospitals had their heating oil, the ambulances were fueled, and the people were safe and warm in their homes. We were called heroes, but we were not treated like heroes. We're mainly immigrants and people of color. All we want is to be paid the wages and benefits that other workers in our industry get. But our company's owner, John Catsimatidis, pays us up to $8 per hour less than workers that do the same jobs. We voted to form the union all the way back in 2019. We negotiated for a union contract for 2 years, but it went nowhere. Catsimatidis would not budge. He didn't think we deserved the same wages as other workers in the industry. We decided to go on strike to get justice for our families, but Mr. Catsimatidis retaliated against us. On the first day of the strike, I got a letter saying I was being permanently replaced. He targeted me because I was the leader. Over the past 10 months, 8 of us have been fired in retaliation for a strike. New York City bears some responsibility here. Despite what John Catsimatidis is doing to us, New York continues to buy millions of dollars in fuel from the company. We desperately need your help. New York City should not be doing business with companies that abuse workers and underpay immigrants. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. I now have here with me Ivan Arizaga, also a terminal worker at UMEC.
Good afternoon. My name is Ivan Arizaga, and I'm a terminal operator at United Metro Energy in Brooklyn. Thank you for holding this hearing today. We have been on strike since April 19th of last year, 10 months. We are striking for better wages. We are striking for a better future for our families. After just 1 week on strike, the company stopped medical benefits. I'm a father of a type 1 diabetic son. He couldn't get his medication anymore. It's one thing to come after us. It's another thing to punish our families. Good health care is no joke for our workers. We're risking our lives breathing in the fumes. A lot of the workers in this job end up with cancer. We are making so much money for this company and its billionaire owner. We can't pay us fairly. Instead of giving us the wages we deserve and ending the strike, the company is hiring less experienced scabs. They pay the scabs more than they pay us just to try to break our strike. We are asking our elected officials to do something. John Catsimatidis continues to mistreat us and our children, but New York keeps sending him millions of dollars anyway. Our city shouldn't be subsidizing our pain. Our city should be holding this company accountable. Please stop the buying heating oil from United Metro until the workers are treated fairly. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Demos and your colleagues. I'm going to now turn it over to Chair De La Rosa for questions, if you have any questions for this panel.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for coming here. It takes a lot of courage to speak up. to tell your stories, to talk about the inequities that exist. I would like to express my solidarity as the chair of the committee and the commitment to follow up specifically with the architects as well as the Teamsters. Count on me to support your cause. I'll be in touch after the hearing personally to see how I can be helpful. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to hear your testimony today and understand that the inequalities and injustices that exist for workers across the city continue to play out even after this pandemic. And I fully agree with the statements of the Teamsters. We should not continue to contract folks who continue to erode the rights of workers. So I will follow up after the hearing, and thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to remind council members, if you have any questions for this panel, please use the Zoom raise hand function. I'm going to give a few seconds to see if any council members have questions. Seeing as there are no hands raised, I'm going to now turn to our next panel, public panel. I'm going to be calling on Zach Levitin, Hildelyn Colon Hernandez, and Ligia Gualpa. I apologize in advance if I messed up pronunciation. Zach, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, and thank you for welcoming us here today. My name is Zachariah Aaron Levitan, political representative with the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 1500. Representing over 17,000 hardworking essential grocery and manufacturing workers in New York State, we at the UFCW Local 1500 express our sincere excitement to be working with you all. We hope to create a strong working relationship between our local and the Committee on Civil Service and Labor in a way that is proactive and provides the information necessary to lift the floor for all working New Yorkers. UFCW Local 1500 is committed to growing the union grocery workforce in New York and doing so with an open line of communication with our elected officials. When a large non-union grocery store is planning on moving into the 5 boroughs, we would like to work with you to make sure those workers have a voice on the job. We have worked with council members in the past to keep low-road employers out of the city and to welcome employers who are committed to bringing workers to the table. We would appreciate your collaboration to do the same now across a multitude of industries where workers are yearning for more democracy in their workplace. UFCW Local 1500 members continue to put their lives on the line to put food on our tables. The health and safety of our members is paramount to us, and we urge you to consider their safety the same way we do. Our members and all workers deserve to be treated like the essential workers they are always, and you can help make that happen. As you reflect on ways to elevate the voices of working people, please consider how low-road employers are taking advantage of their employees. How are hourly wage, scheduling, and discrimination laws abused by employers to disempower their workers? These are all issues the Civil Service and Labor Committee can address and use its leverage to lift the floor across industries. We also encourage you to address the issue of worker intimidation as well as other egregious violations by employers. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and we are so excited to be engaged, and we look forward to collaborating with you.
Thank you, Zachary. I'm going to now turn to Hildelyn. Hildelyn, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts
Thank
now.
you. Good afternoon. My name is Hildelyn Colon, and I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Partnerships for Los Deliveristas. Thank you, Chair De La Rosa, for inviting us and for all the committee members. As we mentioned, I represent delivery workers that have organized under the initiative of Los Deliveristas Unidos. This is half delivery workers that are actually working for Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, many of the apps that are actually operating in our city and serving many of the consumers in our city. Due to this council and to the support of this council, these delivery workers were able to achieve new labor rights. And I can say this, that in 2021 and 2022 is not likely to say that. More than 65,000 workers wake up with new labor rights that they didn't have. Our fight, obviously, granting some of the issues that the chair mentioned about wage theft, about issues, access to the bathrooms, about a minimum wage and others. These workers right now are being able to be on the street about educating other workers. And I want to recognize the partnership that we have with the Department of Consumer Affairs. They're out there every day, doesn't matter what the issues of the weathers are. and also for a lot of the city council members that have come and meet some of these workers. We are here to address that the fight for our workers are not over. The greatest fight is to make sure that workers know their rights and they use it. But I think it's more to come. Our campaign is very particular, which is something that we asked the city council to address, is the impact of technologies having on the workforce and how that relationship is actually going to take place. I think the city council, they have never been afraid to be the first as we pass the legislations, but I think it's also the opportunity to have to do it. And I want to also highlight and encourage and continue the city council to encourage that this is the way to do it, right? Asking workers what their issues are, asking what the solution that they have been able to fought through, have them at the table, right? And actually help them to get those legislation through. This is where Los Deliveristas live and make that happen for us to get these bills done. And we hope to continue with the new city council member, with the Sheriff Carmen de la Rosa, to bring that. We need to have workers at the table. We need to make sure that they be heard, and they actually, the ideas that they put forward, as I said, all the legislation that passed were actually workers' ideas, right? And like our workers have the solutions on how to fight it in the workplace. They know how to do it. They know how to do it well, and they do it every day. I think today, all the workers that have spoke already show how fighting can be done and how it can be achieved. And I think City Council have an opportunity to set that platform, not only for the city, but it's also across the nation, because in this fight of Los Deliveristas, the whole nation is watching us about how this new profile and how this new fight is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hilda-Lynn. I'm going to now turn to Ligia. Sorry, I'm so sorry if I messed that up.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Chairwoman Carmen de la Rosa, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify here, also on behalf of Workers' Justice Project and Los Deliveristas Unidos, along with my colleague Hildali Colon, and also a member who you will be hearing soon, Santos Calixto Chauvin, today's hearing. My name is Ligia. I'm the Executive Director of the Workers' Justice Project, a workers' rights organization that represents New York City delivery workers through Los Deliveristas Unidos, house cleaners and day laborers, essential workers who are vital to the city's economy. And Workers' Justice Project has been responding to the surge of labor violations in the unregulated industries, as Hildali mentioned, not in the delivery industry, but also in the construction and the house cleaning. We have been witnessing how New York City most essential workers, not only from delivery, but also day laborers and house cleaners, have been dehumanized and treated as disposable workers. Just in Brooklyn, just this month, a day labor worker just died because of the unsafe working conditions that they continue to face in the construction industry. But through powerful worker-led organizing, WJP has demonstrated that there is a new way to help workers secure worker protections and representation. We have helped our members build Los Deliveristas Unidos, a new form of worker representation that is representing, as Hildali said, 65,000 deliveristas. And we're proud to be partnering with New York City Council to set a new set of labor protections. And to really become the first city in the country to regulate this economy. In 2015, we partnered again with New York City Council to sustain and fund the Day Labor Workforce Initiative, which is actually what the chairwoman has been asking for, which is a new model of workforce development that actually serves the low wage immigrant workers who work in non-traditional workplaces, actually setting not only labor standards, but actually securing living wages and a path of employment opportunities in the construction and the cleaning industry. Today you will hear also from a member of Santos Calixto, and we look forward to keep working through the Los Deliveristas as well. The pandemic has completely destabilized the traditional workforce, and thousands of New Yorkers are now turning into gig work to make ends meet. This new wave of work poses a new set of labor issues. As you heard, challenges that require a new way of organizing, a new way of representing and protecting not only app delivery workers, but also day laborers, house cleaners. And Workers' Justice Project, along with Los Deliveristas Unidos, are ready to continue the partnership with New York City Council to enforce and expand protections for day laborers, cleaners, app delivery workers. And our hope is that the City Council will continue this partnership with us by, as Hildali said, I'll finish now. As Hildali said, meeting with us, partnering and strategically thinking how we can create these standards by putting and bringing workers at the table when making these decisions. We also ask City Council to support the expansion of the Day Labor Workforce Initiative with funding of $5.3 million in creating that new development and expansion of a Day Labor Workforce Initiative and also the Liberista Hubs. We look forward to talking to you and hearing from you more as how we can actually expand and create a new way of protecting workers in the city.
Thank you so much. I'm going to now turn it over to Chair De La Rosa for questions for this panel.
Well, thank you so much. Not so much questions, but more thanking you again for taking the time and the opportunity to come here. I have to say that I'm personally inspired by the movement created by the Deliberistas. I know many of our colleagues share those same feelings. Thank you for raising your voices to make sure that the laws were changed in order for dignity and justice for workers to prevail. So thank you so much for being here today. I think there is one question by CM Nurse.
Time starts now.
Hi, good afternoon. Same, I don't have a specific question, but I do want to just express that how much the same way the chair did, that I'm in solidarity with you all. I was a deliverista, I was a hotel cleaner, I was in the trades, I've been a driver. I've worked in the informal, under the table economy for a long time, so I know what you all are facing and how much you are really advocating for working people who often have no idea about what they have access to or hotlines or anything like that. So it's really concerning to me to hear that the Department for Worker Protection is saying they have all the resources they need when we know that on the ground level, the access and information is it's not something you're even thinking about. And we know that we need to proactively put people out on the ground to do checkups on things and just pop in and see how things are going. Pop up, next to a business and talk to some workers because people just don't know what's happening behind doors and in workplaces. So I really appreciate all of the testimony here, and I'm really grateful to be on this committee to witness this. So I just really hope that as the council, we can work together to really resource and put more people on the ground. Even just with the deliveristas and different sectors that are growing, even in my district, 2 South Asian language speaking enforcement officers is not enough. That's not even close to meeting any type of demand. So we really have to resource these agencies on the administrative part to support you all. And I just want to thank you for all of your testimony. And thank you, Chair, for the style of this hearing today. It's really nice.
I just want to say something that you're right. More resources are needed for the agencies that are battling side by side with workers. But I think we also have to adjust how those resources, because what you said is right. On the restaurant, you can go and check in, but on the app, no. Now we're dealing with an app that we don't have access to the algorithm, that the city don't have the data. We are asking, and I know the agency is going to be asking for data in order to put forward the upcoming minimum wage. But I think also we need to start looking about what is the new frontier of the 21st century is, because what the patterns that we have observed, right? And I always say this, the gig economy is the oldest economy in the world, right? All the people that are here, immigrants, have their families experience, or we have experienced it. But that gig economy is moving to an app world, right? That a lot of our people don't have the technology knowledge about it. We don't know the zero transparency on that. That's one of the bills that actually were able to pass last year, to actually have transparency about where these tips are going, where this money is going. And I also want to highlight that the things that a lot of our colleagues here on the labor world are bringing about wage share, we've seen that already happening in the apps. Right, apps are taking the money away from workers. So I think part of the strategic thinking that I know this committee can take on is prepare us for how that 21st century workforce looks like, and how our agencies are going to prepare to kind of like deal with that challenge. Because we're starting to see it as we put forward with Los Deliberistas, and I know other workers are migrating to the app as a way of an additional income, and even be their source of full income. So So I just want to highlight that point.
Chair, I believe Ligia has wants to speak. Jan, if you can unmute her quickly. Ligia, give us 1 second. You're on mute. Give us 1 second.
And I was going to say, if the agency doesn't want resources, there's worker centers that want those resources to do the work. And I just wanted to highlight, and I have a lot of due respect for our brothers in the labor movement, but there's a lot of, we're organizing workers that don't have that infrastructure set in place. In a while, we'll figure out that pathway for unionization, not only of delivery workers, but other industries. I think it's important for this city council in FY23 to sustain that organizing. I think it would have been impossible to build a powerful organizing as Los Deliveristas Unidos without the sustainability of worker centers like Workers' Justice Project and others. So I want to urge you, there is incredible initiatives that we're going to be advocating, knocking your doors. I think organizing, we always have a saying that it says like organized people plus organized money is equal power. And I think this is a relationship we want to build, making sure that resources are put on the ground. Worker centers like us who are requiring that dollar investment to keep on protecting workers who don't traditionally have a union that represents them and organize them. So we look forward to your partnership, as Hildali said, build a new way of workforce development and organizing and representation that I think we are in a unique position to build it in a 21st century in a new economy that is completely changing.
Thank you so much. Chair, do you have any further questions?
No, just thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank all of you. We're going to now turn to our next public panel. I'm going to call on Kevin Elkins, Louis Picani, Fausto Schafla, and Infinite George. I just wanted to flag Fausto. I think you may be requiring translation services, and there is a translator on this call on the Zoom video conference to assist you. So when your time is on, Azil will be assisting. Kevin, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for having us today. It means the world that you brought organized labor and so many other important labor advocates here to the table as you have done. The District Council of Carpenters builds this city from the ground up and keeps it running. Our members are highly skilled in everything from concrete formwork, metal and wood framing, drywall, flooring, architectural woodwork, roofing, and many other skills in between. We're dedicated to recruiting workers from all paths of life, and our representatives are diligently reaching out to underrepresented groups in the trades to ensure our diverse membership resembles our city. As all of our members can attest, and I know this is something all of you agree with, a union career offers life-changing opportunities and a strong pathway to the middle class. These union careers would not be possible without the apprenticeship programs offered by unions like ourselves. The District Council is home to 6 state-of-the-art accredited programs, and everything from general building carpentry to the dock builders and timbermen, millwrights, cabinet makers, high-rise concrete carpenters, and floor coverers. In addition to those apprenticeship programs, we offer 4 pre-apprenticeship requirement targeted towards groups underrepresented in our trades to, again, make sure that the carpenters of today and tomorrow look like America in this city. While open shop developers, and we believe this is a huge problem in the city, continue to provide, or claim to provide, I should say, employment opportunities, these non-union jobs offered have no training, are more likely to be the location of serious work and construction safety incidents, including death, higher risks of wage theft, and thank you to the council and all those who've advocated on making sure we do everything we can to rid ourselves of that endemic, I should say, and temporary job durations where instead of providing a career, it's often a 2-month opportunity paying minimum wage, if that. Our apprenticeship programs, on the other hand, allow students to learn state-of-the-art skills while earning a wage. Union apprenticeship programs are a proven way to forge a skilled, sustainable, and responsible workforce in this city. We believe it's essential we expand opportunities within the city and the administrations, and would go a long way towards accomplishing the goals set out by the chairwoman and the rest of the council members gathered here today. For example, by keeping the New York City Housing Authority construction jobs public, as opposed to the disaster we've seen with RAD, by increasing labor standards on city-funded projects and lowering the threshold for mandatory apprenticeship requirements, the district council and other trades would be able to open tremendous more amount of training slots for your constituents and continue to foster a new generation of hardworking union members. Finally, I would like to extend an invitation to all the council members here and those not here to visit our training center in Manhattan. It's state of the art. You can see firsthand the incredible, diverse, and skilled workforce of today and tomorrow that make up the New York City District Council of Carpenters. Thank you again, Chairwoman De La Rosa, and the entire committee for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. And we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, Kevin. Louis, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Louis, I see that you're on, but we cannot hear you. Louis? Okay, we're gonna go to our next panelist and we'll circle back to Louis in a little bit. Fausto, are you on? Yes, give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. We're having, we're gonna need an interpreter for this, so.
Yeah, no, Fausto had to go to work.
Okay.
So I will be reading his testimony in English. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
I got it here, ma'am. And the Spanish interpreter, I got a testimony here. I don't know if you allow me to read it instead.
Would you prefer if our interpreter read it in English, or do you want to just?
I can read it, it's fine.
Perfect. All right, thank you, Aziel. Thanks.
Time starts
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Fausto Chafla, and I'm a proud member of Laborers Local 79. I used to work for a company called CIVILSERVICE as a demolition worker at many projects. I experienced retaliation while working for ALBA and was fired after talking to a union organizer. My case was brought to the National Labor Relations Board. During the case, ALBA threatened me with criminal prosecution while I was trying to hold them accountable. ALBA was found to have committed unfair labor practices. ALBA must now inform its workers of their organizing rights, and ALBA will receive back pay. My foreman at ALBA was a bully who threatened me multiple times to call immigration. No worker should be treated like ALBA treats its workers. Many of our coworkers are undocumented, and they did not feel free to speak about dangerous and exploitive conditions because if they were fired, they could not receive unemployment benefits. No worker should be coerced through fear into working for a bad employer like ALBA. I asked the city to protect immigrant construction workers by lifting labor standards, protecting us from retaliation, and making it possible to access basic benefits like unemployment insurance. ALBA workers and all immigrant workers deserve safety, better wages, and health care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to now turn to Infinite. George, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Infinite George. I'm a member of Local 79. I'm glad to be invited to this panel. I'm still a staple in my community and in Queensbridge Housing in Long Island City. And there we have a marginalized community by income and a community that's constantly being targeted by body shop employment workers, as well as being targeted by their criminal history. When you grow up how I grew up, and in this marginalized community and with issues with the justice system, people tend to hold that against you. And I think that these people, as well as myself, you need more than one chance. I needed about two, honestly. And to be honest with you all, Local 79 and the union has never held my criminal history against me. They gave me that shot continuously. I was one of the few that needed more than one shot. And I'm thankful for that. And that shot has helped me to be able to provide exponentially for my family. I am currently a student in my second year, going on third year at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies, where I'm studying labor and community development. And there I will help others like myself to help themselves better re-enter to society with sustainable income. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Infinite George. I'm gonna just do one last call. Louis, are you on with audio? Okay, well, we're just going to now turn to council member. Oh, Louis?
Oh, yep, I'm here.
Oh,
Time
perfect.
starts
Great.
now.
We got you.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to thank the council and everyone on the call for participating. We'd also like to thank you to the strikers on the United Metro Energy picket line, and congratulations to the board for all they've accomplished for labor. My name is Ashley Bergenson. I'm sitting in on behalf of Louis Picani. He did have a meeting. He is the president and principal officer of Teamsters Local 456. We represent members in Westchester and Putnam counties. The membership of Local 456 fully supports the Teamsters Local 553 in their efforts to obtain fair wages and benefits. It's almost criminal that someone has, it's almost criminal. Someone so rich has the ability to starve the members into submission. We're constantly fighting for all social and economic justice throughout the state, yet we allow the strike to continue by demoralizing the members who so strongly believe in honest day's pay for an honest day's work, yet they are being denied the ability to perform such functions. You owe the people, the members that are being exploited by the rich, a backing to support them and to have the company do what's right. New York City has an obligation to make sure all companies doing business with the city adhere to prevailing wage laws. I'm asking New York City to contact United Metro Energy and demand they give Teamsters Local 553 the respect that the men and women deserve. Mr. Picani will be contacting all of the elected officials in Westchester that might be doing business with United Metro Energy to do the same. In today's age, when inequities are being addressed at every level, it is shameful that no elected officials have stepped in, and with an attempt to rectify this labor dispute. When this meeting concludes, we are asking you to take immediate action because we can no longer wait for this injustice to be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chair, do you have any questions for this panel?
I do. I have one question for the carpenters. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on your workforce?
Yes, absolutely. The pandemic has, like many other construction industries and industries across the city and country, had an incredible impact on our membership. Our hours are still down tremendously from prior to the pandemic starting. But we've had to adapt as everybody else has, and we'll continue to do so. I think if anything, the pandemic has demonstrated the importance of making sure as many people in New York City fall into a safety net like the ones that the union provides, whether it's the healthcare benefits, the retirement benefits. We have seen the consequences of that time and time again when those workers, especially on these open shop sites, they do not have the same protections. And the minute something like this occurs, it's catastrophic for them. And you know, the state has provided a lot of different resources, whether the excluded fund and others, but that shouldn't be where we go, right? That should be the past. The future, I think, is expanding as many apprenticeship opportunities as possible for those who do not currently have access to the union rights that every New Yorker deserves. And I hope that would be sort of the North Star going forward.
Thank you so much for your comments there. And then I also want to take just the opportunity to thank Carla for reading Fausto's testimony, as well as Infinite George for talking about his personal challenges and how working at the union has really allowed for a new opportunity and a new chapter in life. I think that that's the goal of union employment. So thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you to all of our panelists. I do not see any Zoom raised hands from any committee members, so I'm going to give a few more seconds. Committee members, if you have any questions for this panel, please use the Zoom raise hand function. Okay, I do not see any. So we are now turning to our next panel. I will be calling on Tafadir Suarve. I am so sorry for the pronunciation. Please correct me when it's your time to testify. Bernard Calgary, Carla Cruz, and Santos Zobin. Tafador, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time starts now.
Hi, so thank you. My name is Tafadar, and I'm on Community Board 11 in the Bronx. And I'm a proud member and apprenticeship graduate of Laborers Local 79. My union is known to be an engine of economic mobility for workers from underserved communities like mine across the 5 boroughs. We give people a chance to earn a fair living in an intense industry. And thousands of people of all backgrounds actually apply within minutes every time our apprenticeship program opens up for recruitment, as it's one of the most reputable workforce development programs in the city. You've got marginalized people, whether it's from communities of color, LGBT folks, single mothers, youth, etc., all waiting to apply. Our mission statement is to organize all workers in our jurisdiction. It's a commitment that keeps us at the forefront of protecting and expanding workers' rights in the construction industry. We stood with workers who exposed pervasive sexual harassment in non-union construction companies. We're fighting alongside immigrant workers to win citizenship rights. And we won real reentry legislation in Albany that will give workers on parole better opportunities in the construction industry. I want to thank the City Council for passing the body shop bill in November. It's groundbreaking legislation that will help stop the coercion of justice-affected workers in the construction industry. That's what it looks like to take preventative action to protect workers, and we look forward to enforcing it together. I want to talk about immigrant workers who also have to deal with coercive employers that exploit documentation status and language barriers. In fact, just today, Alba Services, a notorious construction company, non-union, terminated 3 demolition laborers at the terminal warehouse project in Manhattan, who spoke up at a rally last week with the Manhattan Borough President about the company putting out a $5,000 bounty against its employees who filed workers' compensation claims. The communities that such workers live in also were devastated by COVID-19 and its impact. I'm from a heavily immigrant community in the Bronx myself. I'm a first-generation immigrant from Bangladesh, and I still remember people dying left and right throughout the pandemic. It was neighbors, my mother's doctor, and eventually my own father I lost to the pandemic. The low-income communities where immigrants live have had to contend with food insecurity, loss of work and healthcare, backlogged rent payments, and many more factors that aggravate already existing inequality. Economic activity crashed in our neighborhoods after pandemic assistance ended, with less money for struggling families to spend on food and other necessities. I could not be prouder to be in a union that has given me the ability to stand up for my community and my city as an organizer fighting to win legislation for an excluded workers fund. We are going to win breathing room for the essential workers who are left behind from pandemic assistance while putting money into circulation in distressed communities. With the labor movement and elected officials having their back, those workers can have real options to bring employers to justice who take advantage of their vulnerability. The urgency of our city standing in solidarity with its workers is highlighted by today's violation of federally protected rights for workers to organize.
Expired.
Weeding out bad actors like Alba creates a fairer economy for workers and employers who play by the rules. And we know that this historically diverse and progressive city council will work with us to protect workers who speak out about bad employers while creating jobs with real entry and labor standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Tafador. We'll now hear from Bernard. Bernard, you may begin when the timer starts.
Your time will begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Member and Chair De La Rosa and everyone else for their comments. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I know I only have a few minutes. This has been a very emotional few hours just sitting on this and just listening to everyone speak. And when I saw my brother Infinite taking the call from his car, I know that he was logged on since 1 o'clock while he was at work, eagerly waiting to testify. And Fausto being in the conference room here, who came here early and then had to leave and wasn't able to speak. It just reminds me that there are thousands upon thousands of workers in New York City that don't have a voice, right? And even when there's an opportunity to speak, they may not necessarily always be heard. I grew up with Infinite George, so it's very personal to me to see him turn his life around. I grew up in Queensbridge houses. I moved there in 1979. And it was predominantly because my dad was an alcoholic and he left us, and we were homeless. So we got put on the New York City housing emergency list and we landed in Queensbridge houses. My mother was an immigrant, right, who came here from Scotland, and she was on welfare and she got a job in the factory making a few extra dollars until she got into an argument with a neighbor, and the neighbor threatened to report her to welfare. And I watched how my mom never attempted to work again, because she was afraid that we would become homeless. When I think about how far I've come from growing up in Queensbridge and the opportunities that I have, I personally was incarcerated. I personally was hooked on drugs, right? I obviously, grew up really poor. And I have to say, like, to identify with the workers in this industry, I didn't feel like I was worth a job like my classmates were, right? The people that I saw outside of the projects, right? I didn't think I was the same. I actually believed that I deserved less because of my record or because my mom was on welfare. And I know that there are a lot of people, either undocumented or formerly incarcerated or just disenfranchised for one reason or another, who feel the same way. And I guess if I could do anything, I just want to bring a little bit of the humanness to this discussion, because while we're trying to figure out how to get this thing right through policy, there are people starving with jobs. They're working and they're still going hungry, right? So this is a serious issue, and I'm so grateful to be a part of the laborers, because I know we lead the fight when it comes to this, right? I'm part of an organization that believes, right, in organizing all workers in our craft jurisdiction, right? And me and one of my coworkers were just in Queensbridge on Friday helping folks sign up for the apprenticeship program, and 6 people showed up, right? And 3 of those 6 didn't even believe it was true. They asked us, is this real? Is there really a shot, right? And I know that a lot of people can't identify with that, right? Unless you grow up in that environment. I appreciate the 3 minutes that I got to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Carla, we will now be hearing from you.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, and I want to thank Committee Chair De La Rosa for putting this oversight hearing together. My name is Carla Cruz, and I work for the Mason-Tenders District Council as the Assistant Director for Legislation and Policy. Development can be a driving force to the growth of our economy when it's done holistically to include the workers and communities it directly impacts. Far too often, developmental policies in our city have favored developers and increased their wealth while leaving construction workers behind with no safety nets or protections. Many construction workers were forced to work under unsafe conditions without healthcare or emergency savings during the pandemic. It doesn't need to be this way. We can ensure there is equity in our city's development. Construction workers need to be at the forefront of developmental policy, especially when these policies have a direct effect on them and their families. How can this council ensure policies help engineer broader developmental goals such as economic growth, poverty reduction, and healthcare communities? By ensuring standards such as compensation, healthcare, and other benefits are applied to zoning, land disposition, subsidies, and tax abatements. Laborers Local 79 and the developmental community have reached unprecedented agreements, setting a new model for how to build permanent affordable housing with union labor, hire locally, and create more pathways to the middle class and low-income communities of color, setting a new standard for moving forward, and a standard we hope this council champions and helps expand. Local 79's partnership with L&M Development includes the building and renovation of 3,200 affordable housing apartments in Harlem, East New York, and the Bronx by local workers at a pay of $40 per hour, along with healthcare and retirement benefits. This kind of transformative development is the kind we hope to see this council champion and expand, especially on city contracts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. I'm now going to call on Santos. Santos, you may begin when the timer starts.
The time will begin.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Santos Chauvin. Soy de Guatemala, tengo 27 años y soy miembro del proyecto de la justicia laboral. Estoy aquí...
Santos,
¿Sí?
yes, yo soy el intérprete. Puedes leer un poquito más despacio para interpretar. Dame un minutito. Puedes comenzar ahora, ¿ok? Pero lee despacio, ¿ok? Para interpretar.
Okay. Buenas tardes, representantes, líderes de la comunidad.
Good afternoon, representative and leader of the community.
Y activistas. Mi nombre es Santos Serech. Soy miembro del centro.
Ok, mi nombre es Santos Calixto. I'm a member of the... ¿Usted es miembro de qué?
Soy miembro del Centro de Proyecto de Justicia Laboral.
Ok, I'm a member of Centro de Justicia Laboral. Adelante.
Y estoy aquí representando a más de 15,000 trabajadores.
And I'm representing more than 15,000 workers
que formamos parte de nuestra organización.
that we are members of our organization.
Yo supe de Centro hace 6 meses.
I knew about Centro just 6 months ago.
Yo llevo en este país 1 año.
I've been in the United States for a year.
Dejé a mi familia en Guatemala.
I left my family behind in Guatemala.
Con la ilusión de cumplir mis metas y sueños.
Hoping to fulfill my goals and my dreams.
Dándoles una mejor vida a mi familia.
And trying to get a better life for my family.
Y porque en mi país la economía es muy dura.
Because in my country, the economy is really hard.
Cuando llegué a este país, conseguí un trabajo que me pagaba $120.
When I arrived to this country, I found a job that paid me $120.
Como ayudante en la construcción.
Like a helper in a construction.
Hasta que un compañero me habló del centro. Un miembro.
Yeah, so a workmate of mine talked to me and told me about Centro.
Del proyecto de justicia laboral me habló y me conectó con el centro.
He told me about labor and justice, and he connected me with Centro.
Decidí formar parte del centro y gracias al centro he podido recibir.
Yeah, I decided to be a member of Centro.
Entrenamiento de 40 horas de OSHA y en salud y medidas de seguridad para tener mi tarjeta SST gratis.
Yeah, because I'm a member of Centro, you know, I've been receiving training for more than 40 hours, and I'll be able to get my SST card, you know.
También por medio del centro he podido conseguir.
Also because of Centro, I've been able to get
un mejor trabajo que paga un mejor salario.
I've been able to get a better job, okay, that pays me a better salary.
Y con empleadores más responsables y dispuestos.
And also with better employers and more helpful.
Dispuestos a firmar un acuerdo en donde se comprometen.
And they agree, you know, these new employers, they agree to sign a new agreement.
A respetar nuestra media hora de almuerzo y nuestros derechos.
A new agreement where they will respect our lunch time, which is half an hour, and our workers' rights.
Muchos de nosotros dependemos de nuestro centro para tener oportunidades para trabajar.
Yeah, a lot of us, we depend on the centro so we can have opportunities to work.
Y hacer de nuestros derechos que sean respetados.
And make our workers' rights to be respected.
Sin el centro, muchos estaríamos sin trabajo y desesperados.
Without the centro, a lot of us will be without a job and we will be desperate.
Porque cada día se hace más difícil conseguir trabajo.
Because every day it's harder to find a job.
Y la oportunidad de entrar en la construcción de una manera más justa y digna.
Yeah, and also it gave us a chance to get access to enter the constructions, okay, in a more dignified way.
Por esa razón les pido que sigan apoyando para que nuestros centros sigan extinguiéndose.
Yeah, for that reason, I would like you to keep supporting and backing up Centro so it can, you know, extend more their benefits.
Les pido apoyo para que muchos más podamos conseguir trabajo.
I will ask you for support so many more like me can find jobs.
Porque todos deberíamos tener la misma oportunidad de trabajar.
Because we all should have the same opportunity to be able to work.
Con un salario justo para solventar las necesidades de nuestro diario vivir.
Yeah, with a fair salary, so we can meet ends meet. We can find all the day-to-day. We can get access to all the day-to-day needs.
Estamos orgullosos que nuestro centro y la lucha que estamos construyendo con su apoyo.
Yeah, we're very proud of our central and all the, fight and achievement that we're getting because of the support.
Y con miles de trabajadores que trabajamos en la construcción, reparto de comida y en la limpieza.
Yeah, there's a lot of 1,000 workers that we work on constructions, cleaning, and also in the food industry.
Esperamos seguir contando con su apoyo.
We're expecting to keep counting with your support.
A la fuerza laboral migrante.
And support the immigrant force.
Que construimos con nuestras manos en esta ciudad.
That we use our hands to build this city.
Eso es todo. Gracias.
That'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Santos. I'm going to now turn it over to Chair De La Rosa. If you have any questions for this panel.
I do have one question, but I also want to thank the panelists who have come so passionately to advocate for worker justice. Thank you all. Thank you, Tafadar, Bernard, and Santos Calixto. My question is actually for Carla. And it is the question I've been asking everyone today. How can we as a city work to improve workforce development?
Yeah, so when it comes to the construction industry, I think the first thing that we need to do, especially when it comes on the council side, is get away from that narrative that affordable housing, permanent affordable housing, specifically housing that is publicly subsidized, cannot be built with union labor, cannot be built for our members. The partnership that I just mentioned to you literally sets a new standard. It's a model. L&M Development, they do affordable housing and our members are in those jobs, but not just our members. We make sure that the agreement welcomes also local hiring, and we're set the wage at $40 an hour plus benefits. So I think there's definitely ways where policies where we can really set labor standards and enforce them when it comes to publicly subsidized development. But I think it starts by, like I mentioned at the beginning, getting away from that notion that we can't build with good wages. We can't build to make sure that our construction workers have healthcare and emergency savings, because we've shown that we could do it. So I think that to answer your question, Chair, is that's where we believe we need to start, because for a long time we have been kept outside of the development world and our construction workers don't really have a voice. So we can just start by making sure that we're in the room, that our workers are in the room, then that's how we can figure out what is the pathways to make sure that our construction workers are not continually being exploited, especially on city contracts.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have concluded this panel. We will now turn to our next public panel. I will call on you all, and please start your testimony when the timer starts. I'm calling on Angel Ocasio, Jeff Vokredit, Melissa Sheltler, and Patricia Campos. Angel, you may begin when the timer starts.
Your time will begin.
Good afternoon to member of the City Council. Thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to discuss how to strengthen workers' rights in New York City. My name is Angel Ocasio, and I am a member of 32BJ and cleaner in a school in the Bronx. I have been working there for over 6 years. I also have 4 children, 3 of graduated from New York's public school and 1 who's still in high school. 32BJ represent over 5,000 school cleaners and handy person in New York City public schools. As a shop steward, I am always hearing from my coworker about the improvement school buildings needs because they haven't been upgraded. The age condition of our schools, of our buildings, makes our job that much harder. Many people think workers' rights are about the rights to organize a union or our wages and benefits. Workers' rights are also the right to a healthy and safe workplace. 32BJ and other unions in the New York City public schools, together with our allies, have fought for years to remove PCBs, lead, asbestos, and other dangerous substances from our schools. When we speak up and when we take action to protect workers' rights, we are also protecting the rights of the children and the family we serve. We urge the NYC Council to invest in our schools and protect schools facilities from any cuts in this year's budget. When buildings are this old, school cleaners have to put in double the amount of effort to do our job. Not all buildings have air conditioning, and it gets harder during hot summer days to do everything we have to do in the extreme heat. There are school buildings with windows over 40 years old, and many buildings have very poor energy efficiency ratings. Many roofs are also very old, and whenever there is heavy rainstorm, the roofs are leaking. Just a few months ago in October, over 250 of co-workers throughout NYC schools had to stay overnight at schools building to protect the school from flooding. Unfortunately, this type of effort is not unusual for cleaner and handy person at the NYC school. My co-workers often have to stay overnight to make sure boilers are running properly when the temperatures are below freezing. Otherwise, pipe might freeze and burst, which has happened in the past. Staying overnight at school buildings to make up for updating facilities means time away from our family and unable to get proper rest between shifts. These struggles are made even difficult because of staffing shortage due to the hiring freeze, which had created an added strain on my coworkers and me with additional responsibility to clean and disinfect for COVID safeties. Council members, please, school facility need increased investment for energy efficiency, upgrades, not budget cuts. The type of severe weather events are seen will only keep happening more and more often, and they keep testing the limits of our age school facility. We all work hard to go to the extra mile, but the buildings themselves need to be upgraded. 32BJ is part of a coalition with other unions working to evacuate for upgrade to our school buildings to bring our facility to the 21st century as proposed by the Carbon-Free Health School Initiative. I remember during Hurricane Sandy, our school was a reserve evacuation site and all the cleaning we had to do after the storm. I know climate change is a real threat because superstorm events like Hurricane Sandy are happening more and more often on our school buildings are vulnerable. I'm so proud that 32BJ and other unions are taking action on climate change so we can avoid other catastrophic storms. We need the city council to support these investments in school facilities so we can make these much needed improvements for the help of our building and the workers who serve them. I know many students will also be excited to see these upgrades to the school building as well. Doing this improvement will be a major step for our public school, and it will better the health safety to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angel. Jeff, you may begin when the timer starts.
The time will begin.
Good afternoon, Chair De La Rosa and committee members. My name is Jeff Bokrad, and I'm the Executive Director of Climate Jobs New York, which is a coalition of labor unions that spans every sector of New York's economy. Our member unions represent approximately 2.6 million workers in the state and are committed to driving climate action at the scale and pace that science demands, creating good union jobs and careers, and building more equitable communities and a more resilient New York. I appreciate the chance to talk with you today and to be part of this hearing, which has been both sobering and inspiring. And I want to build on what Mr. Ocasio was just talking about. As you may know, earlier this month, we released a report in partnership with Cornell University's ILR school, which was called Climate for Change, a Climate Jobs Roadmap for New York City. The report includes recommendations in the energy, buildings, and transportation sectors, as well as workforce development, recommendations for climate action that expand access to jobs with strong labor protections, as well as good family-sustaining wages and benefits. And you'll hear from one of the authors of the report today, Melissa Shetler. I want to focus on one key recommendation of that report, which relates to the right to a safe and healthy workplace. And that is our recommendation to invest in retrofitting New York City school facilities. And there are many reasons to invest in retrofitting schools and impact on emissions that would be equivalent to taking 161,000 cars off the road, creating tens of thousands of good union jobs, saving schools more than $70 million a year in energy costs. But a core reason to invest in New York City schools is the urgency of making schools healthier and safer for students and workers. And the right to a safe and healthy workplace, as we've heard today, is a crucial component of strengthening workers' rights. It's no secret that many public school buildings in New York City are in serious need of repairs and upgrades, from antiquated heating and air conditioning systems to deteriorating rooftops to faulty plumbing, outdated electrical grids. And that's especially true in too many Black and Brown communities that have been historically underserved and where schools are most in need of investment. The members of the unions on our Carbon Free and Healthy Schools Campaign Steering Committee know those conditions in the school well, from the cleaners and handypersons represented by 32BJ to workers in school kitchens and across the school system represented by District Council 37, to teachers represented by the United Federation of Teachers. And you just heard from Angel from 32BJ give a vivid description of what it means to work in aging schools. So I appreciate the time today. It is time to get serious about investing in New York City schools and promote a safe and healthy place for the school community to work and live and learn. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jeff. We will now hear from Melissa Sheltner. Melissa, you may begin the timer start.
Thank you so much. I want to begin by thanking council members for taking time to hear our testimony. I look forward to continuing to work together to find ways to expand worker protections in the city. I'm currently a labor and workforce consultant with the Labor Leading on Climate initiative at Cornell, the ILR Worker Institute, and crafting the set of recommendations for the Climate Jobs New York report. The recommendations, as Jeff said, are around climate jobs with high road labor standards, looking at transportation, energy, wind, adaptation, resilience buildings, and threaded throughout workforce development that will really serve frontline and historically marginalized communities and lead to union careers. Wind and solar retrofits, carbon-free and healthy schools, all this expansion of safe and healthy work environments in the city while reducing city emissions is a broad stroke win for workers and for New Yorkers. At these exciting job opportunities, we have to ensure that they're good opportunities with sufficient worker protections. Given the labor enforcement agency's ability to investigate beyond complaints, I would just say I would encourage a deeper look at construction more broadly in places where the city has contracts, so HPD, NYCHA, EDC, and in the clean energy workforces. Solar, for example, is a newer industry, and in the solar workforce, we know that there's a lot of worker misclassification. We all know too well what happens in construction when workers don't have a voice. Worker deaths in non-union construction industry far outpace unions, as well as wage theft and worker misclassification. SST training was a good start, but my OSHA card does not bring me the same protections as my union card. I can learn about hazards all day long, but if I tell my supervisor I don't want to do something that feels dangerous, without a collective bargaining agreement, I can be fired for basically trying to protect myself. And as we know, if a worker is on probation or has a particular immigration status, this can be an even more dangerous threat, with workers being threatened for the calling of ICE or violations of parole. The city can't set wage floors, but the city can encourage and grow union membership. As DC 37 mentioned, Garrido, the investment in training for city workers and a just transition on new technologies, and expanding the Office of Workforce Development. So you'll see in our recommendations, really looking at where we do have existing project labor agreements with community hiring and targeted justicing plans, are we actually enforcing them? And we need a multi-agency approach with cooperation. We learned this during Sandy Build It Back, and it really needs to be done robustly. We can remain a market participant to ensure the worker protections. So franchising can be dangerous in that way. If we farm it out, the city no longer can enforce those protections. Looking at things like public installation of EV charging infrastructure, for example, ensuring that technicians are trained and safe and also have a voice in the workplace. Using purchasing power, so carbon-free and healthy schools, expanding to NYCHA and broader retrofits, we can really spur a green tech system, manufacturing hubs in the city with labor peace agreements. Looking to EDC projects and offshore wind and ensuring labor standards and pre-apprenticeship programs. And expanding the PLAs along with funding for direct entry pre-apprenticeship programs. So since that is my background, just to say, but construction skills, pathways to apprenticeship, non-traditional employment for women, and helmets to hard hats, these are programs that practice a form of workforce development that includes labor rights and a path to a union career. So we should be thoughtful about funding programs with job placements that have wage floors. We currently don't even have that much, let alone a labor and union pathway, and investing in safe and healthy workplaces like carbon-free and healthy schools. So as we hopefully transition to this green economy, we have to ensure that we're expanding worker protections, providing safe and healthy work opportunities for existing workers, and creating more career opportunities for frontline communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm now going to be calling on Patricia Campos. Patricia, you may begin when the timer starts. Hold on 1 second. You're still muted. Sorry, Patricia. I think now you're good.
That work? Okay.
Begin.
Thank you for that. Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Campos Medina. I am the Executive Director of the Worker Institute. We are part of the School of Industrial and Labor Relations extension programs here in New York City. Our programs are in fulfillment of the land-grant mission of Cornell University. We are the New York State School of Industrial and Labor Relations, founded by the New York State Legislature. On behalf of Dean Alex Colban and my colleagues of ILR, I want to thank the City Council Speaker, Adrienne Adams, and Labor Committee Chair, Carmen De La Rosa, for holding this critical hearing today. At the Worker Institute, we bring together researchers, educators, and students with practitioners in labor, business, and policy making to confront growing economic and social inequities in the interest of working people and their families. The importance of our work became clear during the pandemic crisis when we became a hub of information and research in support of leaders seeking strategies to combat the crisis of income inequality. That partnership can be viewed in our innovative research in partnership with the Los Deliveristas and the Worker Justice Project that led to the innovative solutions implemented by this council to address the critical conditions of food delivery workers in New York City. We also right now are undergoing industry-wide research on the nail salon industry, which will address the concerns of mostly female immigrant workforce that is suffering from the economic impacts of the pandemic, but also ongoing concern with health and safety concerns in the nail salon industry. We also do trainings on equity and sexual harassment prevention, and we are the leading organization pushing for enforcement and education for reforming issues of sexual harassment, domestic violence as a workplace issue in social justice organizations, labor organizations, and public sector. Today, my comments are going to focus on the result of our 2020 national survey of low-wage workers, focusing on the impact of the pandemic on their experiences at work, hoping that these findings could help guide you as you find policy solutions to the crisis of income inequality for working people. We surveyed, it was a national survey of over 3,000 workers with over sampling of New York State workers and New York City workers. In our findings, we found what you have heard all through today, that employers are practicing wage theft during the pandemic, and they are stealing wages from Black workers at higher rates than from white workers. Since March of 2020,
time has expired.
We also found that women of color are more likely to face direct retaliation when reporting issues of health and safety at work and issues of sexual harassment and domestic violence at work. The findings of our report can be found on our website, and I will submit my written testimony for you to review, where you can read all the details of the finding. But what we are here to say is that the School of Industrial and Labor Relations and the Worker Institute are prepared to serve as a source of data, research, and as advisors on policy innovation that you're seeking to make sure that any recovery implementation supports the voice of workers, supports workers of color, women of color who are impacted in greatest numbers by the ongoing crisis of income inequality made worse by the pandemic. I thank you for this opportunity, and I will be available and stay for some questions.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm going to turn it over to Chair De La Rosa for questions for this panel.
Well, thank you all so much. So many important issues here. I just want to acknowledge agreement with your comments around our schools and the condition of our schools, and my interest and the committee's interest, and hope to continue to look at the issues of climate and sustainability, as well as the issues of the wage gap, sexual harassment, and the treatment of women in the workforce. So looking forward to meeting with you all offline and continuing this conversation in future hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We are now going to turn to our next panel, Cassandra Gomez, Debbie Priya Chattarajay, and Andy Bowen. You will be on this panel, and Cassandra, you may begin when the timer starts.
Thank you to the chair and to the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Cassandra Gomez, and I'm a staff attorney at A Better Balance, a national nonprofit advocacy organization based in New York City and dedicated to promoting fairness in the workplace and helping employees meet the conflicting demands of work and family. For over a decade, ABB has worked with New York City to enact robust workplace protection laws. We are proud to have drafted and shepherded to passage groundbreaking legislation, including the Earned Safe and Sick Time Act, the New York City Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and the Temporary Schedule Change Law, and to have helped draft New York City's caregiver discrimination law. While New York City has a strong body of workplace rights, the pandemic has shifted work-family relationships in all 5 boroughs. We thank you for considering how to strengthen workers' rights citywide. Through A Better Balance's free and confidential legal helpline, we have spoken to thousands of New Yorkers about their workplace rights and have a bird's eye view of workplace issues that New Yorkers face. As detailed in our written testimony, the following policy and administrative solutions are crucial steps New York City must take to support workers throughout the ongoing pandemic and into the future. First, the council and agencies should prioritize outreach, education, and enforcement of critical baseline laws, including the Earned Safe and Sick Time Act, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, the Temporary Schedule Change Law, and protections from discrimination. Next, the council must ensure that workers have meaningful access to alternative work arrangements, including telecommuting and part-time work by, in part, amending the Temporary Schedule Change Law. The council should also pass legislation to address harmful no-fault attendance policies and ensure that workers cannot be subject to discipline for lawful absences, including those related to a known disability, pregnancy-related conditions, or protected sick leave. Additionally, the council should consider legislation to support caregivers balancing the competing demands of work and care with reasonable accommodations in limited circumstances and a clear right to request accommodations without fear of retaliation. Lastly, the council should ensure that all city workers have access to comprehensive paid family and medical leave and revise city policies to better serve the needs of workers. While our city has long been on the forefront of protecting workers, we must continue to work together to enact bold solutions to pave the path for workers in our city to thrive. We appreciate the council's interest in strengthening workers' rights and welcome the opportunity to work together on the actions outlined in this testimony.
Thank you so much. Cassandra, I will now be calling on Debbie Priya to give your testimony. You may begin when the timer starts.
Thank you, Chair De La Rosa and council members of the Civil Service and Labor Committee for this opportunity, and a good afternoon to everyone. My name is Debbie Priya Chatterjee, and I'm a senior economist with the Community Service Society of New York, a nonprofit organization that has championed workers' rights for 175 years. Most recently, we helped pass paid sick leave laws and in statewide and in the city, secured half-price transit fares for New Yorkers in poverty, and advocated for the passage of bills that improved workplace protections for food delivery workers. With many of our coalition partners who are here today. Today, my testimony will be focused on the actionable recommendations for policies to advance and strengthen workers' rights. For most of the past half-century, workers' rights and workplace protections have been degraded by corporations seeking to maximize their bottom lines. Erosion of workers' rights have happened through dismantling of unions and collective bargaining platforms and the practice of contracting and subcontracting out work and misclassifying workers as independent contractors. The consequences have been far-reaching. In addition to stagnant compensation, wage thefts, inadequate and insufficient levels of employer-provided benefits like paid time off, health insurance coverage and access to retirement accounts, uses of non-compete clauses, irregular scheduling, discrimination in hiring, promoting, firing, and use of mandatory arbitration to force employees to settle out of courts have become par for the course for most corporate employers. Unfortunately, because we cannot address all of these problems today, I recommend the following small steps for the committee. Secure workers' rights and benefits for all low-income workers, including app-based gig workers, and ensure that all workers have access to paid sick leave, overtime pay, and unemployment insurance. We urge the Council to pass Intro 1926, which would expand the definition of an employee as covered by the city's paid sick leave law. Our 2021 Unheard Third survey found that 54% of app-based gig workers said that they lack paid sick leave. Our previous research has highlighted the consequences of this. Nearly 4 out of every 10 app-based gig workers reported that they or a family member had been infected with COVID-19. The second, develop and publicly host a portable benefits model so that benefits would be tied to a worker rather than being tied to their jobs. This would allow workers to own and access their benefits regardless of the nature of their employment. It is especially important for many low-wage workers who may have multiple jobs or who are being forced to change jobs more frequently, and such a system would allow workers to keep their benefits when they transition between employers or go through periods of unemployment or underemployment. Portable benefits is not a new concept. Social Security is one of a prime example. Mayor Eric Adams, when he was Brooklyn Borough President, penned a powerful op-ed in the Daily News arguing and imploring the use of portable benefits modeled on the Black Car Fund. And finally, my third recommendation would be improve awareness and enforcement of existing rights and protections. 7 years after city's paid sick days law took effect, data from our 2021 Unheard Third survey shows that 42% of low-income workers covered under the law say that they still did not receive paid sick leave from their employer. DCWP, who testified earlier in the afternoon, to its credit, has ramped up its public education and enforcement efforts in recent years, especially during the pandemic, but low awareness of city's paid sick leave policy persists nonetheless. Half of low-income workers we surveyed still haven't heard about the city's paid sick time law. Increasing awareness is crucial. For this reason, we urge City Council to pass Intro 1797, a bill that would require DCWP to produce posters for voluntary ongoing display at pharmacies and healthcare centers. And lastly, I would like to say, pass resolutions supporting the following state-level legislations. S734, introduced by Senator Biaggi, that seeks to prohibit and restrict the most egregious uses of non-competes in the state. S808, that seeks to eliminate sub-minimum wages for restaurant wait staff. S1848A, introduced by Senator Hoylman, that empowers aggrieved workers to file claims on behalf of the state against an employer for any violation of state labor law. And finally, to fully fund the NY HERO Act that guarantees workplace protections and hazard pay to essential workers, as well as making it easier for small businesses to implement health and safety upgrades. Thank you again for this opportunity to offer our comments, and please read our written testimony for more elaboration on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will now turn to Andy. Andy, you may begin when the timer starts.
Time will begin.
Thank you, Chair De La Rosa and other council members and staff. My name is Andy Bowen, and I'm testifying on behalf of Pride at Work, a nonprofit organization that represents LGBTQ union members and their allies. I'm also principal of Bowen Public Affairs Consulting, which engages in policy advocacy for the cause of furthering economic justice. I'm advocating with Pride at Work and several partners in labor, nonprofits, and government to advocate for a new city council initiative, which we're calling the Pride at Work Initiative. This initiative seeks to address the need for high-road concentrated employment of LGBTQ New Yorkers by coordinating the work of multiple union-affiliated entities, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, and workforce programs that work closely with unions to create multiple pathways into unionized careers, focusing on recruitment of LGBTQ communities in NYC, and primarily BIPOC LGBTQ communities, ultimately with an eye towards this approach being utilized for other populations that are in deep need of stable careers. Partners in this initiative include Destination Tomorrow, 1199 Employment and Training Fund, Non-Traditional Employment for Women, Brooklyn Workforce Innovations, Pathways to Apprenticeship, and DCAS and DCAS. LGBTQ people have in New York and nationally face struggles in finding economic stability and finding work. The most recent New York State Health and Human Needs Assessment for LGBTQ people found 36.1 of survey respondents having incomes below 200% of the poverty line, with respondents of color and transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary respondents even more likely to be below the federal poverty line. Next to that, we also know that LGBTQ people in New York face struggles in finding employment. There are multiple statistics that I quote in reports in my written testimony. New York has started new initiatives to support LGBTQ people finding employment. I've taken a role in helping design many of these. I'm really proud of them, but they largely focus on youth, which is good. And also, like, there's a community of adults, and statistics and on-the-ground experience show they have plenty of need for both employment and, speaking to the poverty level issue, transformative employment of the assortment that union employment can provide. This proposed initiative, which we submitted yesterday, will take a multi-pronged approach to building affirmative careers for LGBTQ people, with LGBTQ affirming partners, ideally those funded by this initiative, working to create maximally affirming workplaces, access to union jobs and career paths, and supports within workplaces and through supportive unions to do everything impossible to make sure unionized job placements remain LGBTQ affirming. This initiative is dearly needed given disproportionate unemployment levels faced by LGBTQ people, and especially BIPOC, TG, and CMB people. The city has the ability to support this recruitment into union careers, and I ask dearly that council support this ask. I'm just going to quote, well, thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I look forward to any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm going to turn it over to the chair for any questions she may have for this panel.
Thank you all so much for your testimony. Really detailed information, and I look forward to following up with you all after. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to turn to our last panel. I'm going to call on Daniel Wright, James Collins, Lisa Flansreach, Robert Rendo, and Mark Levitas. Daniel Wright, you may begin when the timer starts. Thanks.
Your time will begin.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I think Daniel has dropped off. So I will now call on James Collins. James, you may begin when the timer starts. Thank you for waiting.
My name is James Collins. I retired from HRA about 30 years ago. I am here to speak about the right, or rather the lack of rights, of former workers, now retired, for the city of New York. First, who can legally represent and negotiate for retirees? A US Supreme Court case and numerous state cases establish that unions represent current employees, not retirees. The stark conflict of employee interests versus retirees' interests is in the city's plan to totally alter their retirees' health plan coverage is clear to all. You must also be aware that while DC 37 approved the plan, the DC 37 Retirees Association has donated $5,000 to the organization fighting the plan. Similarly, retirees in the private sector are vulnerable, as described in a recent December Wall Street Journal article on AT&T retirees. I am not aware that this issue has ever been addressed, so I suggest the council hold hearings on this topic, inviting the legal community, government officials, as well as retirees to present their views. Second, does New York City really want or need to financially coerce 200,000 of its retirees out of senior care into a Medicare Advantage plan they don't want? Does the council agree with the mayor that from now on, when an employee retires, she has to take the Medicare Advantage plan or pay a $192 monthly penalty, to use Judge Frank's term, to enroll in senior care, $383 per month for a couple? Is the council comfortable with these inequities here? And what does it say to defenders of traditional Medicare and proponents of Medicare for all here in this city council and around the country that New York City instead wants all its retirees in a Medicare Advantage plan and will no longer pay for senior care to supplement traditional Medicare? This is such bad policy from every angle that the council must do whatever lies within its powers to maintain retirees' current real freedom of choice between a premium-free Medicare Advantage plan and the premium-free senior care
Time
plan,
has expired.
and oppose the federal waiver that would allow the city to auto-enroll. Finally, I condemn the cruel, callous, hard-hearted, shameful action of the union leaders, OLR officials, and alliance leaders who would knowingly throw thousands of vulnerable retirees in their 70s, 80s, 90s, many in terminal medical conditions, or fighting life-threatening illnesses, or suffering from Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, out of a medical plan they have enjoyed and used for decades, solely in order to put money into something called a health stabilization fund. And shame on you, council members, if you don't stop this assault on New York City retirees and traditional Medicare. Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Collins, we're gonna go through the rest of the panelists and then we'll give Chair De La Rosa an opportunity to ask questions for this panel. I'm sure she'll have some follow-up questions. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm now gonna call on Lisa. Lisa, you may begin when the timer starts.
Your time will begin.
Yeah, hi. Okay, thank you for listening to my testimony. I'm going to read an article written by Leonard Rodberg, Professor Emeritus of Queens College, CUNY. New York City government has this, it was in the Daily News on August 13, 2021. New York City government has decided to save money by forcing its 245,000 retirees and their dependents to leave traditional Medicare and move to a private Medicare Advantage plan. Most retirees today are on Medicare, which covers 80% of the cost of their care. The city pays for a supplemental Medicare plan that picks up the rest. Starting January 1st, well, it's actually April 1st, the city retirees will be switched to a Medicare Advantage plan funded by the federal government, but run by two private insurance companies. Empire Blue Cross, part of Anthem, a for-profit national chain, and Emblem Health, a New York-based nonprofit. This so-called alliance purports somehow to provide the same quality of care that retirees now enjoy while spending, according to current estimates, nearly 25% less. Anyone who believes that might like to purchase a bridge in Brooklyn. Since its inception in 1965, Medicare has proven to be a just and efficient system for medical expenses. It provides insurance to everyone over age 65, excuse me, as well as those with chronic illnesses, disabilities, regardless of race, ethnicity, income, gender identity. As a federally run program, it is a nonprofit system that avoids the high administrative costs associated with private insurance. And since the vast majority of physicians and hospitals accept Medicare, patients have a wide range of choices. Okay, the U.S. Congress failed. All right, let me skip a little. Okay, the U.S. Congress created Medicare Advantage. In reality, it is Medicare Disadvantage, sorry, required to provide full coverage with only 80% of the money. These insurance companies use a variety of measures to limit their spending on actual medical care, which they refer to as medical losses. They impose numerous copays, which not only shift costs to the patients, but discourage those who might seek care. They limit the choice of physicians and hospitals. Unlike Medicare, they require patients and providers to obtain prior authorizations for tests, treatments, and procedures. leading to repeated denials and
That was
cuts.
expired.
A CAT scan will be deemed unnecessary. The 30 days of rehab will be reduced to 3. Patients will call all over town trying to find a specialist who will accept the Medicare Advantage plan. These limitations can be costly and even deadly to patients. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. Okay, let me just finish.
Okay.
All right. You get the point.
Do you want to continue or?
No. Okay, good.
You have a few more seconds, Lisa.
Many Medicare providers refuse to join Medicare Advantage plans because of the hassles and delayed payments. Worst of all, the city's move will harm those least able to protect themselves. City employment data show that white workers are twice as likely as Black workers and 1.6 times as likely as Hispanic workers to have the higher incomes that will allow them to pay the extra $2,000 to $5,000 to buy their own Medicare plan and remain in public Medicare. Male workers are 60% more likely than female workers to afford that cost. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
I will now call on Robert Rendo. You may begin, Robert, when the timer starts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Rendo, and I'm the spouse of a New York City retiree. I also help run an organization called Protect Traditional Public Medicare. Point 1, with regard to municipal retiree healthcare benefits. James Collins, former chair of the NGO Committee on Aging at the United Nations, reports that the average monthly premium for a Part D drug plan is $33 a month, while Emblem charges $125. Why do the city and the unions allow Emblem this excess profiteering of almost $200 million a year? There should be an immediate forensic audit to find out why retirees have been historically paying so much for drug coverage. Point 2, the city and taxpayer are not realizing any true savings with this map. According to the director of the Independent Budget Office, Jonathan Rosenberg's October 28 testimony, the MLC and the city plan to utilize the savings from Medicare Advantage to provide the stabilization fund with an alternative revenue source. The agreement to move Medicare Advantage continues the use of the stabilization fund as an off-budget transfer of city dollars to a special purpose fund that has little or no budgetary oversight. That is an outrage. Point 3, the MLC UFT attorney Alan Klinger has misinformed the public. When we asked if there'd be a public hearing about this plan, Alan Klinger said no. Why would a very large contract that impacts 250,000 people not be subject to a hearing? When we asked how much senior care would cost if we did not sign up for this plan, we were told $180 a month. Yet the cost to maintain it is now about $192 a month, plus new $15 copays for every service where none existed before. When we asked if we can continue to receive Part B and IRMA reimbursements, even if we opt out, stay with traditional Medicare, and buy our own supplemental insurance, Alan Klinger succinctly told us yes. Those responses were not true. Point 4, the city unions and their consultant Siegel Company ignorantly articulated that you, quote, go to a provider through the senior care plan, and that is purely inaccurate. The fact is we go to a doctor through our primary, which is Medicare. Both the MAP and senior care, if you opt out, feature additional new copays. But the MLC claim that the MAP mirrors the senior care, which again is a patent lie because our current senior care does not charge copays or is part of a system that requires 87 new prior authorizations. Claire Levitt, Deputy Commissioner of Healthcare Cost Savings, stated in an email with my spouse that, quote, the new copays are nominal and no one will be disenfranchised. Yet a National Bureau of Economic Research study known as the Health Costs of Cost Sharing features documented cases of high mortality rates attributable to cost sharing. According to CUNY professor Dr. Len Rodberg, an outcome of this map is a two-tier healthcare system harming particularly women and people of color. Point 5, where is the transparency at town hall and informational meetings? My wife attended 4 of them back in 2021, and copays were never mentioned in any of them. But what has been mentioned is that we retirees are mere rumps, coming from Harry Nespoli in a memo to city union leaders on January 10th. This is City Council's critical chance to show New York and this nation that you, City Council, can create a legacy of decency and integrity instead of this cesspool of indignity and corruption. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rendo. We'll now be hearing from Mark Levides. Mark, you may begin when the timer starts.
The time will begin. The time will begin.
Hello to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hello. I'm Dr. Mark Levides. I'm Secretary of Physicians for a National Health Program, our New York Metro chapter. I want to urge City Council to oppose the mayor's deplorable decision to transfer retirees' health care insurance to a Medicare Advantage plan. Medicare Advantage is neither Medicare nor advantageous. If a person opts to select a Medicare Advantage plan, as Joe Namath asks them to do, that the Medicare transfers a lump sum of money to a private insurance. You now have private insurance. Private insurance makes money. The less money it spends on you, the more money it puts in its pocket. There's no advantage. They give free sneakers, free gym memberships. Those are bribes to get you. Everyone likes his Medicare Advantage plan because they like the gym sneakers, but as soon as they become sick, as other people have pointed out, the co-payments, the denials, the refusals to pay, people go broke on medical advantage plans because the advantage plans are private medicine. What I would ask you to do, not only reject the deplorable decision by the mayor, but you should know, everyone should know, that there's a wonderful bill called New York Health. It's it's both in the Assembly. It's Assembly 5248. It's Senate 5474. If you want to give health care to everyone at a reasonable cost, support New York Health and do not support the mayor's deplorable plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levides. I'm going to turn it over to Chair De La Rosa for questions for this panel. And I thank everyone for their patience.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. I first want to acknowledge your voices, acknowledge the many calls and emails that our office has received on this matter, acknowledge your frustration, your concern, your pain, and my appreciation for you coming to the hearing today to express them here. I want to state that for those that don't know, last October, the former chair of the committee held a hearing on the Medicare Advantage plan. We are in the process of reading up on everything that has to do with the plan, as well as the court case that is before the courts. I am committed to writing a letter to the Office of Labor Relations to request more information on this matter. And I'm looking forward to continuing to engage with you all on this. Thank you for bringing up the New York Health Act. Before this role, I was an assembly member. I co-sponsored the New York Health Act, and I wholeheartedly understand your support for that bill. I want to ask one question. If there was an ideal solution right now, what would you say is the direction of that solution for us to consider?
One second, Mark, Dr. Levides, give us a second to unmute you. Jan, can you unmute the panelists, please?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, well, you know, we have various groups and people have said, make the premium affordable, make it, you know, I know it's not going to happen. Why can't this giant company say, okay, like $25 a month? Come on, I mean, okay, you know, there are very, very poor people who cannot afford this. And they're people of color, Black, Latino, Asian, and women, and they're really getting kicked in this. It's horrible, horrible.
And I just say the solution is to keep what we have right now and not give anything up, because we gave up a lot when we took on these civil servant jobs. We took on lower pay. We gave the best years of our lives. And in some cases, since 9/11, we gave literally our lives away to the city. And this, as far as we're concerned, is a broken contract, a broken covenant made between the city and the workers who made the city function properly for decades. It's deceitful upon the unions to be siding with the city instead of protecting their members. I direct that towards Mr. Mulgrew and Mr. Garrido. And the only thing the city should do is keep everything as is and not use a map, not use the federal government to clean up the mess of healthcare when we should be all be pushing for something better for everybody. And by the way, this affects actives because one day actives, you will retire. Some of you are closer, some of you are further, but this affects all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming and expressing. Thank you.
May I?
Hold on, Chair. I think Dr. Levitas had a commentary. And then after Dr. Levitas, I'll go back to you, James. Sorry. Doctor,
am I hearing?
Yeah.
Yes, this is a big deal. Just to be in 1 minute, every other country of the developed nations in the world has a plan. They're slightly different. They're not all exactly the Medicare for All plan we want, but every other country in the world has better longevity, better childcare, better less maternal mortality. We have the worst healthcare, and we have the most for-profit system. I can't speak too long now, but a Medicare for All program is a good way to go. Let me ask you to go to www.pnhpnymetro.org, pnhpnymetro.org, and contact us.
My response would be a little more nuanced. I have no problem with the city giving people a choice of a Medicare Advantage plan, whether it's the current Aetna plan, which is in effect now, or their new plan that if they want to substitute it. I have no problem with having that choice. But equally, there should be an equal choice, and that's what I just said in my testimony. 0 premium Medicare Advantage, 0 premium senior care. That's what I'm looking for. Now, what you should do now is send this back to OLR. And again, who's going to negotiate for seniors? I don't know that legally. I know they weren't represented in this plan that came out. They had no say in it. And again, look at that. Go look at the legal. Hold some hearings on that. But don't proceed to send 200,000 retirees out of senior care unless they're willing to pay $191 or $383 a month. And again, there are people out there with terminal conditions today who are fighting life-threatening diseases today that the city wants to change their Medicare plan. That is just obscene. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind anyone, if we have inadvertently missed you, if you have registered to testify today and you have not been called on, please use the Zoom raise hand function now, and you will be called in the order that your hand has been raised. I'll give everyone a few moments. I'm also going to reiterate if anyone has testimony, written testimony that they have prepared and they would like to submit to the committee for review, please send all written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Okay, seeing as there are no more panelists, I'm going to turn it over to Chair De La Rosa for closing remarks. And again, thank you all for your patience and hope to see you at a hearing soon.
Well, first, thank you all so much for your patience, for sticking with us for the last few hours. This has been an exciting first hearing. I'm happy that we were able to see the diversity in the voices across our city's workforce. The committee will be laser focused on bringing light to many of these issues, many of the legislative packages that have been passed in order to advance the right of workers. We will be holding additional oversight hearings. We are always open to your suggestions and your ideas and how we can help strengthen the rights of workers. And we will be leading from a lens of dignity and justice for workers of our city. I want to just thank the members of the administration, the experts, the advocates, the workers, the union leaders who joined us today. And I look forward to our future hearings. And thank you to the staff for this wonderful, wonderful hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If you could just adjourn the meeting officially.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.